Warning: the interview you're about to experience has already positively changed people's lives. If applied appropriately, it can change yours too. The views expressed are those of the guest and host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal, financial, or medical advice. Warning: this episode may contain graphic details of the guest's life. Listener discretion is advised.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this powerful episode of the Remarkable People podcast, The Rob Roy Story. You need to listen to the whole thing. You will find value, you will find inspiration, and you will find power in it. This episode was hard for me to actually create this intro you're listening to now because there's so much in it. Rob talks about things that he's never talked about publicly before. This is a man who has not only succeeded in many areas of life, he is a lion, he is a wolf, he is a SEAL, a U.S. Navy SEAL, 25 years. Sony PlayStation, if you're familiar with the SOCOM games, 1, 2, 3, 4, he's on the cover of them all. He has been in U.S. Navy Special Forces commercials. He's been in Hollywood movies. But this story is of his life. And you and I, sadly, have experienced many of the same things Rob experienced. He's gone through everything from bigotry to being molested as a child. He was told in his 5th grade class that nobody in this class is going to amount to anything. And the list goes on and on and on. I've actually struggled to make this intro because I don't feel like I can do the episode justice. So you're just going to have to trust me and listen to the whole thing. It's one of our longer episodes, but it's packed with inspiration and truth. As the episode goes on, just like any conversation, you get to know one another, you become more comfortable with another, you become more transparent and real with one another. Rob goes deep into his personal life, which he's never done before. He'll tell you that he's going to talk about issues he's never talked about publicly in any form, in his books, in his interviews, in his just coaching. This is a first. So we don't want you to listen to this episode because we want to be famous. We want you to listen to this episode because Rob's heart and my heart is to help you grow. This episode has helped me grow as a man. It will help you grow as a human. Listen to it, take notes, reach out to Rob if you have any questions, and just know that there is practical value and truth that we've all struggled with. I don't think there's a human on this planet that won't connect with at least parts of this episode, if not the whole thing. And at the end of it, you're going to be not just more informed, but you're going to be inspired to act. And that's what we all need to do. Like our slogan says, don't just listen to great content, but do it. Repeat the good each day so you can have a great life in this world, but more importantly, an eternity to come. So at this time, get ready to hear Rob Roy's story and let us know what you think at the end. Reach out to Rob again. If we can help you in any way as a Remarkable People podcast in our community, let us know. But you will not be disappointed if you stick through the entire episode, I promise. So at this time, our friend and American hero, Rob Roy. Hey, Rob, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing real good.
Well, I am excited to have you here. Our listeners heard just a small portion of your story, and there's a lot to go through. We're excited to be here together, but if someone's deciding if they want to listen to your episode, what do you guarantee that they're going to get if they listen start to finish to this episode that they can apply to their lives?
Well, normally I would say, because of my ego, I'd say they'll learn a lot about me, but I think they will learn a lot about themselves. My story is not unique to anybody else's, but the way I tell it and the way you're going to ask me questions, and I'm so open about what I've gone through, I'm sure that anybody who's listening to the podcast, male or female, will get a lot from it and say, I was like that, or I remember that, or that happened to me, or I can't believe that happened in your struggles. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you, sharing it with your audience.
Yeah, man.
And they should stay to the end.
Yes. So let's do this, Rob. We don't want to dwell on the past, but we want to learn from it. And everything that happened, good, bad, ugly, pretty ugly, everything that's happened to us makes us the men and women we are today. We're a man, but for our listeners, the women, right? So where'd you start? What was your origin like? What was your family like? Where were you born geographically? Just start off in your story.
Man, that's a lot. That is a lot. So I have to go way, way back, start the clock. I'm a product of my environment, which is to say that I was born in Mississippi, and then my parents moved. They were together. They moved from Mississippi to Chicago, and Chicago to Milwaukee, and I was raised, as a young adult, not a young adult, but as a child in Milwaukee until my adulthood, until when I left. And that's a story in itself when why we left Mississippi and how we ended up in Chicago and how I was raised in Milwaukee, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, our listeners are from all over the world, different
Mhm.
cultures, different geographic locations,
Mhm.
but we all have humanity. And so everything
Right.
that's happened to you, like I said, good or bad, it makes you who you are. It's part of your story. So
Mhm.
what was being raised like and what was the home like and how to bring you to
Well,
a new
let's just
destination?
kind of, yeah, let's kind of start with, and I want to share this, and it's probably the subject matter is kind of foreign to a lot of people because these things have changed over the last 60 years, and I'm older. When I was raised, they were in Mississippi, and the township I was from, there were dirt roads. The sidewalks were still wooden back then, and the bathrooms were outside. This is in the 1960s. And me retelling the story is me being told the story by my brother when I asked him about, why do we leave Mississippi, Bullard, Mississippi, which is for most people know geographically that aren't geographically challenged. It's in it's in the where all the cotton and stuff was grown. It's a specific area where cotton grows really, really good down in Mississippi. Just off of the plantation. We were on the plantation. We were just off of it, and a lot of black people live off of around the plantations that are down there because of everything that happened in the past. And I'm by no means saying that, I harbor any ill will to people like that or the people who own those plantations. It's just that's where I came from. So that's my upbringing. So my parents were not very educated. I think my father had a sixth grade education. My mother had a sixth grade education. My father, before I was born, he had my older brother. And before I was born, I had an older brother and I had an older sister who just recently passed. My father would go to, because jobs are not plentiful in Mississippi, they were plentiful in Chicago. So if you wanted to work, you basically, a lot of people migrated to the north, much as what we see now. Went to Chicago, worked in the meat packing factories up there, and then wanted to. The story I normally tell people is that he couldn't really count, even though he had a sixth grade education. So he learned how to count because you got more money if you knew how to count the head of cattle. And then while he was up there, he also found out that that's where all the cotton goes. So we grew cotton, well, they grew cotton, and they were getting a certain price for it. The story goes with my dad is that he learned what cotton prices were in Chicago and then came back to Mississippi and went to the owner of the plantation and said, "Hey, you're ripping us off. Your prices you're selling for is more than what you're paying us, and you're only paying us half of it. We're working the land." It's called sharecropping back in that day. And my father was like, you need to give us our fair share. You've been ripping us off for years. They got into words. Colt told my father that in uncertain terms that you need to be out of here before sundown. Because, basically what would happen if my father started telling the story to everybody else, it would just upset the norm that's there. My father called him a bunch of names, beat the guy up. And I know a lot of people would say, well, that's hard to believe. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're talking about a different time and a different, when men were men, when you said something and you meant it, then there was a repercussion behind it. So my father was riding his bike home because he didn't have a car. Well, he had a car, but he rode his bike and was run off the road by a bunch of. I would say they're like Klansmen, but the way the story is told to me, I guess more for impact that they were Klansmen. Let's just call them that, or just say people that were not actually appreciative of my dad pulled him over and said, "Hey, you're not getting out of town tonight. You're going to die today." And so they pulled the trigger twice. Now, the thing about my dad, this has happened twice to him in his entire life, where somebody pulled the trigger and the bullet didn't fire. I shouldn't say the bullet didn't fire. The weapon didn't fire. It basically, in this particular case, the guy pulled the pistol out, put it to his head, said, "You're going to die." Pull the trigger. Nothing happened. Pull the trigger again. He goes, "You're lucky. Be gone by sundown." So we got in the car and we drove to Chicago. And that's where I ended up in Chicago for like 3 or 4 weeks or months. I don't know. I was really small. And then I moved to Milwaukee. And that's where my kind of journey begins, where my memory kicks in about who I was and what I did and how I got to where I am today, which is a unique, not a, defining like there was just something that happened in my life specifically that got me to do all the things that I did, but that I had a consistent upbringing in the same neighborhoods, if you will. You can imagine my mother and father didn't stay together after that. They got to Milwaukee, probably 3 years old. And my father was accused of child abuse back then because I pulled something off the stove. And in these memories that I have now kind of frame of who I am about, how I treat children and how my kids need to stay in one place, because these are all the things that happened to me that, yeah, they helped me build out my character. And if you talk about character of an individual, that's the trials and tribulations they go through, right? That's that making of a warrior, is that the more experience you have with adversity and I'm not saying people have to be abused, but the more trauma that you have, and the more you come out of it, the more you can do. Like if you're talking about raising a wolf, or you're raising a lion, not to use these kind of animals as creatures that can to marry up what a person is, but these are kind of the images that would come out when you're talking about how do I raise a person? Am I raising a wolf or am I raising the sheep? And sheep are protected. They're moved together, fed, and they provide a service. And most people treat their kids like they're sheep. They're the shepherds, and then their kids are the sheep, and they don't have any experience and they don't know what to do when a wolf comes along. I was raised as a wolf. I was raised as a lion. And what I mean by that is the neighborhoods I grew up in hardened me to understand that I can do a lot if I did it. If there's nothing available for me, I need to make things happen. And what I mean by that is if there wasn't a job available, I had to find a job that was available to me that I could take, that I could do, and I could do well and make money doing that. And it's not just about money, it's about who you are as an individual and what you try to aspire to be in the future. I never saw myself becoming a Navy SEAL, owning my own business, being on television and being a marketing campaign for Sony PlayStation and all the other things I've done in my entire life. But I would tell people it started when we moved from Chicago to Milwaukee and into the neighborhoods, and then being moved around and going to the different schools and all that trauma that happens along with it. The one thing I would say from, say, an early age, I watched a kid in third grade hit another kid in the head with a chair. This is a school called Palmer. It's in Milwaukee. And it resonates in my mind that people can do the most disaster, not just disaster, but terrible things to other people. And this is third grade, right? The third grade that you think, okay, hopscotch, and then you throw the ball or dodge the ball or whatever. But I watched this kid in the old days, there were these big wooden chairs. Now they're plastic, or they're just these flimsy things. But in the old days, there's these big, thick wooden chairs that last 100 years. He cracked him over the head. I remember the sound of the chair hitting this kid over the head in the chair. And I kind of stood there like, what just happened? But in reality, in my upbringing in that particular neighborhood, that was a norm. That was a norm to see violence at that such an early age. And it was like, I can't believe he said that and he got hit in the head with a chair. Whereas it should have been more of a shock. But it also let me know that, you can't just trust people to not do things to you, to not attack you. And that goes back to that warrior, that line. It's like, protect yourself, look around, know your surroundings, know the enemies you're making and what they're capable of doing. If you know your enemies and what they're capable of doing, then you can keep yourself safe, you can keep your family safe. So that was a lesson in third grade. Know your enemies, know where they're at, know where they're coming from, know what you need to do to protect yourself. And I am by no means a person that is, I live in fear. I don't. I don't live in fear. I take precautions, but I don't live in any kind of fear. I'm not a person that's sitting around waiting for things to happen to me. I believe that you need to take the fight to the enemy. And what I mean by that is you need to prepare yourself, whatever that's going to be. What are you armed with? If you're armed with your God, if you're armed with weapons, if you're armed with whatever that's going to be, what is it that drives you to be more successful? What is that drives you to be prepared? What does it even taste like? So in third grade, I stayed in pretty much the poor parts of Milwaukee, and this is back in the early days. And you say early days, it's like sounds like it's such a long time ago, but in reality, it wasn't that long ago when segregation was the norm, right? You're talking about the blacks live on one side, and you talk to the whites live on the other side, and the Puerto Ricans and Mexicans live on another side, and everybody was divided. And now I know people say, well, the redlining is you're treated unfairly, and yeah, okay, yeah, but I'm third grade. I don't care about redlining. I don't care about all that other stuff. People tend to take on a worldview that's not necessarily beneficial to them. My world was the blocks that I lived on, or the block I lived on, and then whatever route I took to get to school. It wasn't all this other stuff where people were marching. And now, look, I'm not saying that that stuff's not important. I'm saying that for a young child, my worldview is my worldview of 10 or 15 people that I know in the block that I live on. And that's my worldview. And then to give a kid more than that is to basically to hamper your kid's or child's ability to see the world for what it is. Because we can only take in what we can take in. We're not taking in more than that. I'm worried about what's happening over in Af Afghanistan. If I'm as a child, and I'm worried about what's happening over in Ukraine, if I'm worried about what's happening in Israel, if I'm worried about all those things, I can't take in any more what's happening with me around me. I gotta be the warrior in my neighborhood, not the warrior overseas. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying that your children need to be understanding, or like for me, I needed to understand where I was at and what I was doing. And so that was my first lesson. Was in fifth grade of a school called Victor Berger. And these life lessons, and I tell people that these life lessons that I learned are roads, right? They're like forks in a road. So you can go one way or the other way. You choose, you make a choice and what way you're going to go. Now you don't know where it's going to go. You're driving, I'm going to go left. I'm going to go right. But you need to listen to your heart to tell you what way to go. Right? As an older person looking back, I made these turns, I made these transitions, I made decisions based on where I thought I was right then. Not where I was going to be in the future. Not like, hey, you're going to end up in, you're going to be a movie star or something like that. You're going to be a rapper, which wasn't around when I was a kid. Or you're going to be playing football. I never thought about that. I thought about where do I need to go to be more comfortable. So at Victor Berger, I went to school and I tried to be the best student I possibly could. And I think I was pretty smart. And I had a fifth grade teacher says, no one in here is ever going to amount to anything. You're not. Right? We can go to school with, and I don't have any idea. I just remember him saying this. Of all the days I was in that school, this is the one day I remember him saying, no matter what we do, no matter what you do, you guys will never get out of the ghetto. And I think I would say that that's the first time I realized I actually lived in the ghetto, right? Because it was never referred to that. It was always home, and home is where the heart is. But when people tell you that you're never going to do something, it's what do you do? And I went home to my mom and said, I don't want to live in the ghetto. She goes, you don't live in the ghetto, live in a house. She goes, oh, but that said, this teacher told me that we live in the ghetto and we're never going to get out of here. She goes, you don't have to listen to him. He's not in control of your destiny. My mother's a very religious person. She says, God has a plan for you. And you don't know what that is. You're not opening your eyes to that. You need to believe in that there's a story and there's a mission and there's a page in the book for you. And I remember that, and I said, okay, so I don't remember anything else that happened after that in that school year because it was irrelevant. But I do know my mom took me out of that school and put me in another school. And this one was more, this is like seventh grade. And she chose to put me in this school because she thought it would be the best school with the best people that surrounded me. You surround yourself with your friends. If five of your friends are making a bunch of money, then you're going to make what they're going to make. If five of your friends are not making money, you're going to do what they're going to do. So I believe her mind, because now I'm at a grade higher than what she had when she achieved. Now my mother and father weren't together after I think I was like 7 or 8 years old. So it's just my mother. So all my input, all my natural motherly influence came from her, or influence I got was from my mother. And how do you raise a wolf? Wolves are not very gender specific. My mother wanted me to do well. She always said I wanted you to be successful. Didn't care what it was. I'm going to give you opportunity. So I went to this magnet school, 7 years old, and it was good. It was great. I learned a lot. Learned a lot about math. Learned a lot about other people. Learned that there were people living a different way than I lived, and lived in different neighborhoods. And because we're talking about what made me be where I'm at, how I got to where I am today. I tell these stories because I've never told anybody before in the past. And when you're listening to me talk about this, it's more in line with who is this person and how did they get here? Now, my later years are a lot more detailed as far as like what happened to me. These earlier experiences are ones that I remember when I look back in decisions I made or choices I was given that I had to make them. So you're talking 60 years, and I remember something in seventh grade because that's a road I took. That's a choice I made, a conscious choice to do something different. So we're back to this school called Robert Fulton Annex, and I remember knowing that there were other things out there. There were better places to live. There were better things to do. There were better opportunities for me then. I remember I watched a movie called Old Yeller back then, right? What do we remember about Old Yeller? Yeah, we remember the dog getting shot,
Yeah, I was just
right? It
gonna
was
say he
very,
dies in
very
the end, right?
emotional, right? Yeah, we remember the dog getting shot. I remember that's right. It's just like it was so emotional for me, and then it brought out other things that had happened. Not, and I wouldn't say that it brought out other things that happened to me, but it was the most emotional experience I'd had at that point. One, I finally got to go to a movie theater, and two, that this dog was killed so viciously. Now that's what I remember. I don't know if the dog died or not. That's like
Yeah,
the movie Shane. They go, "When are you coming back, Shane?" And he's riding away, and then people argue whether or not that he was dead when he rode away on the horse. Do you remember the movie Shane?
I don't remember the movie Shane, but I do remember Old Yeller, and I do remember
Yeah.
seeing it at the theater, and I remember
Yeah.
crying with my friends,
Yes.
and I remember
Yeah.
getting a pencil case or something. Like, remember in those days they gave gifts
Yeah.
at the theater if you
Yeah.
went
They
during certain,
did.
yeah, if you went during certain times, they give away
Right.
gifts to get you in,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
remember that. I do remember feeling that emotion, being so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was probably one of the saddest movies I ever seen, even today. I haven't seen it since then because I'm not a big, strong guy, but I'm like, man, I may cry in that thing again because I remember because I was young then. I was so young when young. It made an impact in my life, and I knew that the depths of emotion at that point that I could watch something and I could cry and what would it be 60 years later or what probably 45 years later, and I still have the same emotional response from seeing that movie the first time. There's a couple other things that happened to me between third grade, probably second grade to seventh grade. I want to talk about, and so we talked before, and I said I'm going to share some things I never talked about before. And I want to say that people live with clouds in their life. They live with trauma, and trauma tends to dictate how a person responds to things in the future. And it's taken me years to get over this. Once I realized this happened to me, and I was basically sexually assaulted, not basically sexually, I was sexually assaulted when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. That's what's the least I can remember. And I couldn't tell you how many times it happened. I just know it happened the one time. And I visually recall everything that happened. And I struggled with that up until like a few years ago. I went to therapy actually. Um, and how a person could rob the innocence of a child like that. I don't know for years how I was around people, but my own children and my grandchildren and any young person I see, I'm more protective of them because of that and what people say and what they do. I'm hypersensitive to it. I'm hyper aware of it. And maybe that's what maybe that's what it's supposed to be. I work with kids all the time now. I don't work with young kids. I work with older kids. I raised my grandson. And I'm still today hyper aware of who my kids are around. And I tend to believe that that's a good thing. Not the trauma, but I'm hyper aware of people around my children or around my kids or around my grandkids or other kids and the purpose for why they would want to be around a child or the purpose of why they want to dress a kid a certain way, the purpose and the why of why are they paying so much attention to that child because of what happened to me. I don't see pedophiles around the corner, but I do think that my anxiety and my vigilance goes up when this happens because it happened to me. And through my entire spec war career, and I'm sure there are other people that went through similar things because it happens a lot more frequently than people think. and not to be able to talk about it, not to be able to share it with, my wife didn't know. I've never shared it with a girlfriend. I never shared it with anybody except for this your and my therapist. So that's why I'm not so emotional with it.
No, and I thank you for being so transparent and open and only talk about it as deep as you want.
Yeah.
But like, I'm getting emotional because it's just to think when children have abuse
Mhm.
and there's different forms of sexual abuse. Like you said, how could someone do that to a child? And then you have to process it. But then at the same time, God gives us all certain traits. And you mentioned the lion, the wolf, and different characteristics. And if you were born to be a lion and you have that protectorate in you already, people don't understand that a lot of times people think, oh, you're overprotective. No, that's a gift, number one, to protect those around you. And you like sacrifice in some ways without even realizing it to help others. So now you get hyper sensitivity to it. So I guess let's start with what are some of the things you did, or maybe it comes later in your story. What are some of the things you did with your therapist to let you get to the point where you can talk about it, where you can work through it? Because there's people older than us who have been holding on to this for 70 years and they literally
Mhm.
have had a miserable existence because they've never talked about it, they've never worked through it. So what would you say to those people who are struggling right now?
The hardest thing to do is to acknowledge it happened. We tend to want to compensate. A trait that, I shouldn't say a trait, a defense mechanism that most people have is to compensate by saying, I must have done something, or that probably didn't happen the way I think it happened, or I remember it differently, or what was I doing? To basically to control what happened, you take on the pain of the incident to say, yeah, that it must have been something I did, something we addressed. Something could, because I can tell you, I don't even know how I even got in that bed. All I remember is the laying in bed and getting penetrated and not knowing what that feeling was. I will say this about people that have gone through this is that it's it it can create other people, right? So you get assaulted, and then you're like, you don't know what that feeling is. You don't have an idea. You're chasing it, right? You're chasing that feel, depending on what it was, who it was with, and when it happened. You may not be aware that your body, because your body's different than your mind. Your body may be attracted and you become hypersexualized because that's a feeling that you don't understand what it is, but you understand that either that it's something that that your body's comfortable with. And I'm not trying to say that people who are assaulted have sexual desires, but they do become hypersexual afterwards, right? So you're a lot of pedophiles create other pedophiles because that's what happens, right? You don't just become a pedophile, you get assaulted and you become a pedophile or a person that desires certain sexual aspects. And that takes away from your spirit of who you are because it consumes you. And with my therapist, I had issues. I had accelerated relationships. I had, the porn addiction. I had, the sexual desires that I shouldn't have had with porn and, abusing women and all those things. And you can draw a line straight back to my being assaulted and how I treated women at some point. I apologize and to any woman I've dated and treated them wrongly. It's because, and I'm not saying because of that, because I'm an aware person. I'm a conscious being. But when I talk to my therapist about it, it's like, yeah, pretty much all your sexual problems are from when this incident happened. Because most people won't talk about it. And then when you don't talk about it, and you don't share, you don't bring it out. If you don't bring it out in the open, you don't put light on it, then it stays in the darkness. And when it happens in the darkness, then anything can happen. It doesn't stay that one traumatic event. It creates other traumatic events in your life.
A
It's
hundred.
not, it's not a, yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you. There's a slight delay, so I apologize. Um,
Okay.
no, I mean, if someone doesn't believe in God, if they
Yeah.
have their head in any form of reality, it's
Mhm.
documented. And if you know somebody, if you yourself, you're not meant as an adult to be molested or raped, let alone as a
Mhm.
child. You can't like rationally work through the
Mhm.
issues, right? So you're basically miswired and rewired and not in a healthy way. And it's not because you did anything wrong. It's because someone did something wrong to you. And now you have to learn
Yeah.
to undo the knots. And like you said,
Right.
I don't know anybody personally, myself included, who's been molested in some way who it didn't carry through to you talk about it. And then the Bible, for those who are Christians, the whole book of First John. That's one of my favorite books in the Bible. Very short, just a few chapters, but it talks about exactly what you're saying, Rob, bringing things in the light. And it talks about how if you bring
Mhm.
things in the light, they heal. But if you keep things in the darkness, bad things grow. So talking through it and working through it, sometimes it takes a moment, sometimes it takes years, but it's necessary. And I love what you said, how just accepting it happened to you is huge. So thank you for being so
Yeah.
open and real. So
And I want to add my faith has helped me as well. Like I said before, my mother was a Christian. I was a Christian. I was raised Christian, and I never had a problem in the church. But you can't bring that up in the church. You can't just say, "Hey, I was assaulted." You can't. It, I don't. I don't know if it was in my head at the time, but I didn't think it was a safe my this is me, not the church. I didn't think it was a safe place to say that because everybody's Christians, everybody I'm saying it. My in my mind, everybody's pure. And then if I bring up something like this, and somehow I'm gonna look, and this is what we do, compensating, right? We compensate. We go, okay, I'm not gonna bring it up because I don't want people to look down on me. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I'm not going to tell the people. These are the closest people to me because I went to church every Sunday. And this happened not with a church member. This happened with a family friend, my mom, one of my mom's friends. So you got to bring it out into the light. You got to share with somebody that you trust. I wouldn't walk up to some, and I say that because I'm on a podcast talking to, hundreds of thousands of people. But I think it's something in my journey in my life that I wanted to share. Like when we talked before, I said I want to share some things about me. I want to bring them out to the light, and I don't want them to be secret anymore. 45 years, 50 years of being a secret. It's hard on you. It is unbelievably hard on you, and it goes from the way you dress in the locker room, when you walk into the showers, when you're around other males, and then it's all these things that you think are small things that are actually big things that affect your success. And I know we're not talking about this all the way through, but I do want to just bring that up and say that you need to, if you're another person out there that's going to something like that, reach out to somebody and talk to them and let them know. And it's not whether or not they empathize with you. It's not whether they have sympathy for you. It's whether or not you get it out into the light and you release all the shadows from your soul, and you feel better. You won't feel better right away, but you will feel better. And not to look for any answers of why it happened to you, because you won't get them. You just won't get them.
yeah, and it always
The
makes
the question would be is, yeah, go ahead.
no, go. This is your show, brother. I mean, go.
I say, yeah, I was to say that the question would be, well, when did I find out? Well, obviously I knew when I was a child, but I blacked it out. Like there's memories that are gone that I blacked out for years. So you can ask me what happened then. I don't know. I don't remember because I just picked that chunk of memory and just chunked it, got rid of it. But I will say anything that's sexual in the nature of that would happen to me freaks me out. Like will put me in a corner, trembling, just trembling. And I'm a big guy. I'm like 280, 6'1". And so there's things that could happen to me now, not so much now, but before that would put me in a state of that child again, that child that was assaulted. So when I think I was 40 years old. I was driving back from LA for one of my gigs up there, and I was talking to my mom. I used to talk to my mom on my long drives. And now I was like, hey, I'm having these dreams. It's not like that. Like I'm having these dreams, like my marijuana. No, I was like, hey, mom, I'm having these dreams. I'm not sure exactly what they were. Now, this conversation with her, the lead up to that was there were months on those phone calls when I was driving home that I wanted to ask her, but just never really, you got to find the moment. You're always trying to find the moment to ask. And you're afraid if you say something wrong, was my mother compensating again? What would my mother think if I asked her this question? Did this really happen to me? Am I making this stuff up? What's going to be the conversation? Because we compensate, right, for the other people in our lives. This particular day, I said, I'm going to ask her. I would say, I was on the phone. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And before we got into the pleasantries, I said, hey, I'm having these dreams about, I think something happened to me when I was a kid. She's like, what happened to you as a kid? So I think that this guy, and she goes, this is what my mother says. She says, you don't have to worry about him anymore because he's still in jail. That was it. That was the end of the conversation. You don't have to worry about him because he's still in jail. And I was like, what? You know, that
Yeah.
was my confirmation. It really did happen. And I'm like, you knew about it. And so I was like, oh, she said, you don't have to talk anymore about it, baby. He's in jail. You don't have to worry about it. So now I had confirmation. And that started the journey to go back with a therapist, for like 10 years, go back and try to, one, find a therapist that I could talk to, and two, somebody I was comfortable with bringing it up. So you asked earlier, you know, people are out there going through the same thing. I'm like, it's not an easy journey to bring it up, especially when you're older. It's even worse if you have to ask your parents. And I feel as a therapist, I feel for women that have been assaulted in sexual stuff because you can't bring it. Who are you going to bring it up to?
Yeah.
Who can you bring it up to? These victims that are out there that are constantly, being attacked. And if you want to use the Bible, you want to say that Satan plants a seed, and that seed, sexual assault or whatever that's going to be, spreads to other things, then that's what it is. What makes us do the things? What whispers do we listen to? The one that's easy or the one that's hard? The one that's easy usually causes us a lot of emotional trauma. The one that's hard is, like you said earlier, following God's light. The one that's easy is it's not. It's the devil's way of seeding you and dragging you down. Now, I don't normally talk like that, but that's exactly what it is when I try to explain to people. It's like, yeah, that guy that's on your left-hand shoulder, whispering to you, telling how easy it is and what you can get away with, that's not your friend. The other guy's taking the hard road, being the lion, that's the hard one. Because that's your rest of your life. So, those are we're talking about up to my eighth or ninth grade. Oh, we're seventh grade. Another thing that life-changing moment for me, because that's what I'm going over is my life-changing moments to get me before I became a SEAL. Like, what are the paths I took? Where did I go? We got the assaults. We got the victimization or the hitting over the head, being situational aware. Or the assaults of taking care of myself, the demons that are in my soul. We have here's an opportunity for you to become better. Here's another person telling you you're not going to do well. Two people, one in seventh grade, one in fifth grade, telling me one says, hey, you can do great things. The other says you're not. These are all the things that are formulating in my head. As I move on, I'm driving, I get transferred. Now we're talking about segregation. And my father, my mother's boyfriend, my father lives probably 3 blocks from us. Remember, I said earlier that you live on your block. My dad lived three blocks from us. So I never knew he might as well have been in another state because I didn't travel outside my area. I would go to the bus stop, but I never traveled in that direction. When you live in those type of neighborhoods, you don't really, you don't, you don't go on a walkabout. You stay in your neighborhood.
It's
So,
unsafe. And for people who don't understand, they've
yeah,
never been in that situation. It's
yeah,
like these are your parameters. And sometimes going back and forth to school, you're fighting your way home anyways. But then
yeah,
if you go outside of your neighborhood, you're not belonging there and you're in real
yeah,
trouble. So it's real. It's in America. It's in every country. But if you've
yeah.
never lived that life, like Rob's talking about, you one more thing to praise God for.
Yeah, that path to your school is safe. That path outside your area is not.
Yeah.
Talking about grocery stores and everything else. You just can't do it.
I remember
So
growing up and the kids at the top of the street and the bottom of the street used to fight all the
yeah,
time. It's like two
yeah,
separate places altogether.
yeah, yeah. It is. It is. It's a weird. I will say this about my neighborhood is that, and I'm jumping around a little bit because it's important because we were just talking about this, is that my neighborhood, the kids, people usually use where move where the kids are at, and of the people in my neighborhood that's alive for my age. I can't mention this guy's name without his permission, but he was not somebody I looked up to, but somebody who was a rough and tough and probably a year older than me, went to prison. I don't know what he did, but I came home once after joining the military. I was a SEAL, and his car sitting out in front of my mom's house, and some guy's waiting in the car, and my spidey senses is up. He gets out of the car, and I'm like, what the heck? I'm gonna get into a fight in front of my mother's house? And he goes, "Are you Rob Roy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Rob Roy." I'm like, I drop back. "Yeah, I'm Rob Roy." Like, who the heck are you? He goes, "Hey, man, just relax. I'm just, I'm the guy across the street. My name is XYZ, And I said, "What?" And then he had a nickname. Everybody has nicknames. My nickname was White Rob, by the way.
White
So,
Rob, White
right.
Rob.
Nobody called me that to my face. They called me White Rob.
Why did they call
Yeah,
you
'cause I used
that?
to go to all these, like, these schools because I went to all these white
Oh,
schools. Yeah, yeah.
got you.
I didn't go to school in the neighborhood. After fifth grade, after that guy said that to my mom, I never went to another black school ever. I went to all white schools after that. And so when
Got
I
you.
came back, they would be like, "There's White Rob." It's like, but he said, "Man, I'm glad you got out." Because in the neighborhood, they call it you getting out. They don't like you moved on. It's like you got out, like you got out of the neighborhood. And I was like surprised when I was talking to him because I got a daughter. I've been in prison for a bunch of years. I didn't see her until I got out. I'm just trying to be the best man I can be. You're talking about 40 something years old. And he's saying, "I'm trying to be the best man I can be now." That's a lot. I don't know what he went through. I think his journey was different than mine. But for him to find me and then talk to me about it, which made me proud of myself that I said, I guess I made good decisions. But inside, I got all these other demons that are running around inside my head. So I still haven't made good decisions. I've still got all the stuff that's, I hadn't dealt with the assault at that point. I still was not good to women around me. I had my own demons I was dealing with. And that's what they are. They're with you everywhere you go, helping you make decisions. So getting back to high school, my dad, my father, or I can't say his name either, but this guy was. I remember going to the school. I remember this so vividly as when people take you out of your environment and they put you in another environment. People are like, "Well, just bus them." Yeah, that's great, except for it's a different culture. If you go 5 blocks from your neighborhood, it's a different culture. You ship somebody 45 minutes from where they live, it's a completely different culture. I went to the suburbs, and people out there called their dads dad, right? And they've been with them since they were children. That didn't happen where I live. So your dad was the latest boyfriend your mom had. And I know people were saying your mom was a Christian. How could she have a bunch of boyfriends? Yeah, yeah, it happens because you got to survive. When you got to survive, you do whatever you can to survive. I don't chastise my mother for the decision she made because I'm a product of what she did for me. But when you have to eat, you eat. And when you can't eat, a person that's hungry, that has food, eat when they want to. They become lazy. A person that has to survive, that's hungry, is going to do whatever they can to feed their family. That is straight up the honest truth. I don't chastise my decision for. I don't know my mother. Mother had a sixth grade education. She worked her ass off in the hospital for 30 years. Never took a sick day. She led prayer classes. I can get into that later, but she was an unbelievable person once we were out of the house and she didn't have that weight of raising those kids. My mother became this unbelievable Christian, giving back to the neighborhood, had a food pantry. It's a lot of things. But before that, to get us to where we needed to be, she was this guy. Now, the story about this guy is he made me work, took me out, work ethic, right? How do you train a lion? How do you train a wolf? You make them work. They get experience. We learn. Our characters develop from the hard work and the discipline. He would drop me off. He had a lawn care service. He would drop me off at these apartments and then say, cut the grass. I'll be back in the afternoon and you'll cut the other side. It's like I'm 14, so I'm 15 years old. I'm like, what? Lawnmower, here's some gas, cut this grass on this side. I'll be back around lunchtime. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's 4 hours. You couldn't do that now because of labor laws. Tomorrow you're gonna weed whack. And I was like, oh, I get to cut this grass so I can use that weed whacker. Because I was like, the weed whacker's cool, right? Did not knowing you're working 17, 18 hours on the weekend. But and I told him after my mother passed, I said, I got work ethic from you and I appreciate everything you've done. I went up to him at the funeral and I said, we don't talk much, or we don't talk at all, but I want to let you know that all that work when I was a kid, you put me out there and you made me think for myself. You made me know that there's a better world out there. And I would say today, I don't know if he did that because he thought I was going to be who I was, but the fact that I got those lessons from him, I'm appreciative of it. I told him, I said, I'm appreciative. I'm a Navy SEAL because of it. It's a great work ethic. I know when I need to get things done. I know the quality of work because he was like, this is not done right. You got to do it over. But I remember driving with him because my school, they were all like, dad this, dad that, dad that. As a kid from the ghetto or from my neighborhood, and you're talking to other kids and they're telling you about their dads and what their dad said to them and what their dad would expect from them and what they're going to do for college, it's a missing link in my neighborhood. Having a dad that promoted you and helped you and worked with you and worked with your hands. So I was driving home with him from school. He picked me up once and he was driving home from the school, and it's a 45-minute drive. And I said to him about midway, and I can tell you there's in Milwaukee, there's a place called the KOSS factory, KOSS. They make speakers. And why that's so important, because indelibly, when things happen to you, you remember that moment in time. And I said to him, I said, as we're driving down the highway, I think it was a 94. And I said to him, I said, hey, you got to bring it up, right? We were about halfway through the drive. And I said, hey, I just want to know, it's like, can the kids at school or they're all talking about their dad's this and their dad's that. And, I don't know what to call you. And I just want to know if I can just call you dad because everybody, and he stopped me. He says, I'm not your dad. You got a dad. And I was like, yeah, yeah, but, like what? And I'll say that every memory after that with him, I don't have. Shelved it. And that's hard. It's hard on a boy. And I decided that because of all the other things that happened to me at that point, that I need to get out and be on my own. I was 14. Like I got to get out and be on my own. I don't like the trauma because that first trauma you get is built on that second trauma, and then that third trauma, and then that fourth trauma, and then that fifth trauma, and then that sixth trauma, and they just get worse and they get to what it's like weights to put on your shoulder. And if you don't do something different, then those weights are going to drag you down. I call it the ghetto claw. And I, at 14, I was like, I need to get out of here. So I decided that day, I need to leave. I need to get out of this environment that I'm in. Now, was that me talking or was that God saying, hey, there's a message for you? Like my mother said, there's going to be great things happen to you. And I used to say that over. My mom said, I'm going to be good things are going to happen to me. I need to remember that. My mom said things are supposed to happen to me. Mom said God's going to take care of me. Mom says there's a path for me. It's the only person I was getting that from. No one else was telling me that. There's a plan for me. And I didn't know what that was. I think she may have thought that I wanted to become a pastor or a preacher because I was kind of on that path, meaning I was involved with the church a lot. But I was definitely afraid to speak. And I was like, Mom, I can't be a pastor. I'm afraid to talk to people. I'm afraid what people would think about me. It goes back to that compensating again. I'm making excuses before I even do anything. So my mom at 14, I said, I'm gonna leave as soon as I possibly can. And this is your 14-year-old kid telling his mom that. She said, what about school? I said, no, I'm going to finish high school and I'm going to be good at what I do. But I realized that there were two worlds I was in. There was the segregated, self-imposed, black ghetto, that no one's going to go anywhere. And then there's this suburban school that accepted me, but not accepted me. And I'm not saying that the people it's just a different culture because my black friends that were out there were just like the kids in the suburbs. So you got to go with culture, right? You can't go, well, it's black and white. It's not. It's just that those kids had money. We didn't. All those kids had parents. I had a parent. And years later, when I go back there now, I'm still friends with all my friends from back then as well. I think that a young person trying to find their way can get lost unbelievably fast if they're not shown the right way. Now, I'm not saying shepherd them because I think being a sheep is not the way to go. I mean, giving them the tools to become lions or become wolves so they can get the experience and build a character of who they are, which I already had because I already started working for my mother's boyfriend for a while, and I was on my own pretty much. I was the middle child as well. All those lessons, all those things that happened. I remember one of the another point in my life was when I was probably 16, probably 17 years old, and I decided that I'm going to start doing my homework the way it should be done. I put a lot of work and effort into it. And one of my teachers says, there's no way that you or Cape did it because I've never seen it. I don't believe it. I don't think this is your work. And I was like, no, I actually did this. So I could take that to one or two way, and I'll tell you which way I went, but there's one or two ways. Like, screw it. I'm not going to do it anymore. Screw them. I'm going to screw them. I'm not going to do any more homework. I'm not going to do it the way, I'm just going to fade off and just, I'll be like all these other kids. Right? I'll be in the basement classes. Or you go, not only am I capable of doing this kind of work, I can do more. The easy thing would be screw it. The hard thing is to be like, I'm just going to duplicate my efforts and I don't care what you do. The thing about being the best that you can be is that a lot of times it's better than the people that are around you. And what people tend to not focus on is you are the best that you can be when you're the best when you can be. I know that sounds crazy, but I was telling my nephew this the other day. I said, I want you to be the best that you can be, which means that what you're doing is going to be better than everybody else's. And his question to me, because I'm bringing him into my life because of his family problems back with his parents. And I said, man, the reason I said your product's gonna be better than them because I think you're better than they are. So by contrast, if you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do, your 100% is gonna be their 50%. But if your 50% is their 100%, you're not giving 100% of your effort. He looked at me and said, I don't understand. I'm thinking to myself, of course you don't, because no one ever told you that you're better than everybody else. I didn't say that part to him, but I was thinking to myself, I said, of course he doesn't, because no one's ever told him he could do more. They've always told him he can be less. They've always told him that you're never going to amount to anything. I mean, the reason he's with me is because people thought he was, he's a knucklehead. He couldn't get things done or he wasn't functioning properly. He's an ace, well, not 100%, but he's an A student now, right? Do I have issues with him? Of course I do, but I'm raising him to be a lion. I'm raising him to be a wolf. I'm raising him to be a person that's going to be a functional member of society, right? I'm raising him with God because he has to have something. He has to have a shield. You can't work out you can't protect yourself with your personality. It doesn't work that way because the demons are always there. The demons are there even when you don't think they're there. They're whispering into you. Slow, consistent voices that are constantly telling you, take the easy way out. Drink and drive. Don't pay your debts. Spend that money. There's another payday. Go into debt. Get her pregnant. Don't worry about it. Don't pay child support. Don't pay your car insurance. Don't all these things. Because then when you get pulled, it's not my fault. It is your fault. You're 100% responsible for anything that happens in your life. I'll get back on track. But after all that, when I was 14, 15 years old and with my mother's boyfriend, and then my subsequent, I'm going to do what I'm doing I possibly can. I decided I don't know if you remember this, but my heroes when I was a kid, for you older people out there, my heroes were the people I saw on television, the black and white. We only had three channels when I was growing up. So,
UHF, baby.
Bob, yeah, yeah. It's like I watched Bob Hope.
Yep.
Anybody remember Bob Hope? I watched him on not a USO show. I watched him on an old Navy thing. Him and I forget who he was with, but Bob Hope did a thing where he was joking around on the ship, and I thought, well, that's the life. Making the jokes and being a sailor. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I was 15 or 16 years old, watching TV. That's what I want to do. I want to do that. I want to do that. And I will say that I had only went to one movie theater at that point, and that was when I saw Old Yeller. I haven't gone to the movies; we couldn't afford it. So it was Old Yeller, and then on television, Bob Hope. And I thought, and my superheroes were the comic books. So anything in a comic book, I thought I could be like those because comic books makes you be. They show you that you when you're reading them, you become that character. You become Superman, Batman, whatever. You're just not reading it. You're becoming that person with its integrity and drive and it's not about the rewards you receive. It's about the character of the characters that you're reading. So growing up, I thought I wanted to serve. I wanted to be of service. I wanted to do things to help other people. And I decided I'm gonna join the Navy. So at 17 years old, when I could sign up, I signed up for the Navy. And when you know it, they said, you're not smart enough to become an officer. This guy said to me, he says, because some guy said, hey, you got these two young brothers that you should sign them up to become officers. And we're standing there and he goes, they're not smart enough to become officers. And
Didn't even know it.
I was like, what? What? They're not smart enough to become officers. And I was like, and I remember that because I was like, well, I haven't even taken the test yet, you know? And it bothered me when I was in the Navy that he'd always said, obviously it bothers me now, but I remember telling him saying that to me, and I'm thinking to myself, he didn't even give us a chance. Like, he's black, I'm black. He should be like, yeah, let's see what we can do. You got a year left in high school. He didn't have my grades, didn't have anything. But to be fair, I wasn't a good student. But I was driven, but I graduated. I was successful in the school I was at. I wasn't a formal student because I didn't get going until when you're transferring from the city to the suburb school. It's going to be another couple of years, right? So it took me 2 years to get back on track in school. It was good though. I joined the Navy, became in
And
it's a
that's
boot
more
camp.
hard work. I do want to point out because anytime you're behind and you
Yeah.
just try to get to even, you have to work 2 or 3 times as hard. So that I think I don't
Oh,
want to speak for you
yeah.
that, but that probably pushed you into more greatness of hard work. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. Because you're not only it's the culture you're going into, but it's also when I just told my nephew this. I said it's easier to catch up or easier to keep up than catch up.
Yeah.
So if you come in 2 years behind, you're working your ass off to get to where everybody else is. Your growth model is large. It's from here, but in reality, you're just catching up to where everybody else is, and they're not slowing down. And this thing we call life, they're not slowing down so you can catch up. They're accelerating with tutors and testing and having a plan. When your family, and this is what I wanted to mention earlier, when your family's involved in your education to become better, your family's involved in your legacy. Your dad wants you to become a doctor because he's a doctor. Your doctor dad owns a business. You have that. When you come from the ghetto or from, you, what do you have? What do you want? Which is why so many NFL players are in debt. They try to bring everybody with them, but they don't have that foundation, that intelligence, financial literacy, I should say, not intelligent, but financial literacy to make those kind of moves and make those kind of steps to go to the next level. Everything's about their physical ability. And
Yeah.
there's always, and I'm not talking specifically about football players. I mean, anybody that's uses just a talent to become successful and not their brain to become successful, there's always going to be a cost emotionally, physically. And if there's some trauma involved in that, you're gonna focus on that part of it. It's gonna be there. It's just in the wings and no one knows where no one knows you're probably doing it or experiencing it, but it's there. It doesn't go away. Trauma sits in the body and waits where there's cortisol, which is stress, or it's something that's always in your system. And then you need to, like I said, you gotta get it out in the light.
Yeah.
So I decided to join the Navy. I went to the Navy. Now one thing I will say, I want to go back for a second, is that my my mother, as wonderful as she was, she never came to any of my sporting events. I ran track and field, did football. I tried gymnastics, but was hazed, and a sexual hazing brought back my traumas from when I was a kid, and I didn't understand what hazing was. I didn't think it was racist. I thought it was too, and they don't know this now. And if they're listening to your podcast, they'll be like, "Oh, I remember that when we did that to him." It's like, yeah, it wasn't about what they did to me. It's how I felt. I felt victimized again. I don't know why men want to do the things sometimes that they do,
Because they have issues.
but it was,
We
oh yeah,
that just really
yeah,
comes down to it. I used to have to rationalize when I'd get bullied or picked on or hazed. And
yeah,
then you grow up and
yeah,
you have more knowledge, but it hurts. Like you said, you can still probably feel some of that emotion right now. But if we can
yeah,
stop for a second, this person is who they are because of things that happened to them. That doesn't excuse their
yeah,
behavior or make it right, but they're an asshat because they were
yeah,
molested or treated badly. And now shit
yeah,
rolls downhill and they're treating you badly. So it doesn't give them the
yeah,
right, and they probably need a punch in the face at times, but
mhm,
that's,
yeah.
they had trauma and they're returning the evil instead of love.
All right. Well, because that voice that says this is easier than that voice that says this is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't, obviously I didn't do the gymnastics team. And there was no way that I was going to do wrestling because, because of the mounts. The first
Yeah.
time I got the mount, I was like, whoa, no,
I
no,
love
no.
wrestling and jujitsu, but my mom wouldn't
Yeah.
come to watch me. She came to,
Yeah.
in 3 years, she came to one meet, and no joke, that's the meet I blew my knee out. So she never came again. But yeah, there is definitely some
Yeah.
oddities. And you're in singlet. Did your team wear singlets?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
would be
And gymnastics was
absolutely,
the same thing. Super sexual gymnastics as well.
yeah.
So,
The only
and I was
difference
still dealing
is
with my own trauma.
usually the alpha male mindsets in wrestling,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
gymnastics has some other things going on there.
Well, yeah. 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 So I did that, and then I played football. My mom. Oh, you know what? I forgot about this story. Yeah, there's one I tell to my kids all the time about waiting for other people. I'm gonna go back a couple years, like yeah, sixth grade for a second because it's important. My mom used to give me money to take the bus. I used to play drums, and I would go to this special clinic in the city because there's a lot of the thing about the being in that neighborhood and then the government resources that are available, they're always government resource because people need to eat. I don't mean the people that live there. I mean the people, and this is a negative thing, by the way, is that our government takes you on as a child, as a dependent of the state. So what does the dependent of the state need? They need entertainment. Well, who's going to do it? Well, we're going to hire these people to do it because we're going to pay them really, 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 really well to provide the entertainment for you or to provide a school for you or to provide something for you. So you have a lot of people that come into the city, the government employees, and they provide whatever, right? Because they're paid. And then the poor kids get to go and listen to them tell you about how you can become better and so on and so forth. But a friend of mine, I used to take the bus. No, I'm sorry, I didn't take the bus. I would get bus fare to take the bus to go to the school to play drums. I would walk down to my friend's house and then I would wait for my friend because he was played saxophone, I played drums. And let's say I had to be there at 9 o'clock and my friend had to be there at 9:15. And every time I showed up at this guy's house, he was never ready because it was like 8:30. And then we would leave and I would get the drum practice 10 minutes late. And he would be on time for the entire season. I think it was the summer. And I would be so upset with him, like, why are you late? Why? Oh, we're gonna, because he had to be there until 9:15. I had to be there at 9 o'clock. So my third or fourth time I went there, the drum major guy closed the door and said, and they were doing whatever they were doing, and said no. So in the city they have these like not bulletproof, they have these thick glasses, little squares, and you look into the room, you see everybody. It's got the metal through it, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they have glass and there's metal in the glass and little squares. Basically, it's not I mean, it is a fire door, but it's actually to protect people in the room. This is like a long time ago.
Mhm.
So I was like beating on the door and he's like, beating the door and he goes like this to me, "You're late. And then you're done." And so I couldn't tell my mother that. So I pretended like going every week and I would go with Cornelius and I would show up. I would be late all the time, still late because Cornelius would not be on time. So my mom took me to, we went to the award ceremony and Cornelius got perfect attendance and most improved. And we're sitting there and my name was never called. At the very end, there's like me and two or three other kids. They called us up and they gave us a little, I got a little drummer pin, and then another kid got a little something else. Another kid got something else. The three of us, like the three losers. And my mom, as proud as she was, so embarrassed. I think I got called every name under this creation of ours on the way home about how I was no good and how I let her down and embarrassed her in front of all the people. My mother never came to another event ever, ever after that with me. She just played football, ran track. She just never came to one of my games. And then what I realized that it was so painful for me is when I was a homecoming game my senior year, and they asked everybody, "Hey, are your parents coming?" And I told my mother, I said, "Hey, I got the game. It's homecoming. I'm playing. I'm starting. Are you going to be there?" "Yeah, I'll be there." I said, "Okay, so are you going to be there?" She goes, "Yes, I'll be there." And my stepfather or whatever he was at the time, he goes, we'll be there. We'll be there. We'll support you." So we're down there. We do the practice, and everybody's parents. You can see everybody's parents showing up. They're all nice. They give them the moms a flower, and the dads get a little pen. The parents are all lined up, and we're numbered 1 through 90 or whatever it was, and I was in the middle because I was playing the line. And then DJ is a friend of mine. His parents were there as well, and they're like, "Are your parents showing up?" And I said, "Yeah," because I called them my parents because my mother's boyfriend. So they're calling out the quarterback, one, or the kicker, one, blah, blah, blah. His parents are so on and so forth in the back. And then they go through all the people, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is the time where there's no pagers or cell phones. So either you're there or you're not. Either you're, and I'm thinking they must compensating again. They must have got lost. They couldn't find parking. They're not here yet. They're gonna be here. I'm 15 or 16 years old, and I'm having a freaking panic attack because I'm gonna walk out there on a football field by myself in front of the entire school and the other team. I'm going to be the guy that's going to walk out there by myself. And so I told one of the coaches, I said, "If you see my mom and dad, can you, because I was calling him my dad when I wasn't with him. I'm like, my dad." And that's how much I needed that. I needed to be like everybody else. I needed to have a mother and father. So you'll know my mom. She said, "My dad looks like this." They're like, "Yeah, we see him. We'll make sure to get down there. They're in the parking lot looking for them." And they're like, because they're not here yet. And they're like, "Well, do you know what kind of car?" I'm like, "This kind of car they drive." They don't want me to walk out there by myself either. But I'm starting, so I have to walk. I can't. If I was like on the bench or something, I could have probably pulled it off, right? But I was a starter. Memories. They never showed up. They fucking never showed up. Yeah. So DJ's parents, they knew that they weren't going to show up. And just before they called my name, they walked up to me on both of my arms and said, "Hey, we got you. We're going to walk out with you." And I think I cried from the end zone all the way to the 50-yard line. I was devastated. I don't know if I was crying because they were there or crying because they were there or because my parents weren't there. I don't know. I can tell you today, I just know it was
A little of
super
both.
emotional for me. Yeah. I was so, and then I was like, I can't rely on anybody. I mean, the mindset is DJ's parents are great, but they're not my parents. They need to be there for me. They need to be, they, I don't know, man. I was going through so much back then. But when I went to boot camp, I'm not changing stories because of that, but those three things go together. When I went to boot camp, again, I was telling my mother, I said, "Hey, I'm going to graduate boot camp. I'm in California. It's the first time I've been to California. First time I was on an airplane. You know, right after I graduated high school, I was gone within probably 30 days. For my 18th birthday, I wanted to be in the military, in the Navy. I go there and I have such resilience from all these things that happened to me. Like all these things that have happened in my past made me strong. I was in boot camp. I had no problem. It was, I was like this warrior that could withtake whatever they were throwing at me and then throw it back. I was 18 years old and I was running my company of 80 guys. The natural, in my opinion, natural leader. And the only reason I wasn't the RPOD, this RPOD and the APR, I was running the company, but they had this old guy with me because he felt rejected if some 18-year-old punk was going to be the one running the company. But I had zero hits. I had zero problems. I was always perfect. I was perfect. I was in my element there. It's perfect because it was based on your what you could provide, right? Not your past, not your family. Not, it's like, what are you doing for this team? It's 80 people. And then the guys were, because I was used to being by myself. So I didn't have alliances. Even though I went to boot camp with a friend of mine, I didn't have alliances because I wasn't used to it. So I was like, no, we're going to get this done. And I don't have to worry about what you think of me because I've had better people think worse of me. So I was getting shit done. I was the honor man of boot camp company. Yeah, it was number one in my boot camp company, my division.
It's a high honor.
Yeah, it is. It was, except for I celebrated by myself because, as usual, nobody fucking showed up. I was out there by myself. Seaman Rob Roy, you know, and he's receiving the honor of blah 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 blah. The big plaque and blah 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 blah. Rob Roy, and I was like, it was so. I was that kid back on the 50-yard line in the end zone again. Nobody's there. Just they had a dinner that night where, the honor man came for the division and there's all these people with their parents and I was there by myself. It was it's I mean, I still a traumatic event for me. And I say that because a friend of mine in boot camp who's a basic RDC, which is what they call them now, the guys that run the boot camp companies. I went back to Great Lakes probably like 5 years ago. And he says there was a graduation. You want to come to the graduation? I said, yeah, I'll come to graduation. And I was sitting there, and I was like, I was sitting, and I was telling him, I said, this is fucking hard. He's what? I go, I remember being here by myself. It's one of these kids being alone when the parents didn't show up. I go, I'm feeling like the kid, and I could see it. He goes, and this guy was like, yeah, I feel it too. I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, my parents weren't here for me. He goes, I get emotional every time I do this because I go back to my parents weren't there for me. I'm like, man, I'm not going to hug you, but this is a moment. I was like, yeah. So we just both got there like, warriors. Like, yeah, we understand each other. We understand what it takes. He's a chief now, and that's good. But, I went through my first 4 years in the Navy. I saw people dying. The USS Nimitz I was on had a fire, and I saw people, mangled, explosions. It's my first real exposure to war combat. And this was just an accident. You can look it up. It's the USS Nimitz fire on board the ship, they say because of drug use, not drug use, but what do you call it? The pilot had taken some antihistamines or whatever, but he missed his mark and crashed a bunch of planes. And they were doing OREs, which is operational readiness exercise, and a huge fireball on the ship, explosions. And we were up all night trying to put out the fires. And I think I was like 19. And I had seen the movie about the forest stall, which is another carrier, aircraft carrier, where the wooden decks and a bomb that went off and caused a bunch of fire. It's like a movie they train you on. And I can see the deck swaying when I was came out of the berthing compartment. A berthing compartment is where you sleep and trained. This is what we do in a fire. This is what we do. It's an emergency. This is your battle station. They train you on all that stuff when you're in there. And I responded. I mean, there's a longer story behind why I did that, but I don't want to hold the audience up on it. But we got our evening prayer because you get evening prayer in the ship every night. They do at 10 o'clock at night. And this particular night, everybody in the military knows that let us pray means bow your head. And then they give a prayer. All right. It's a prayer for the soldiers, those who were and are alive, past. And it's a probably 15-minute prayer by the pastor or the chaplain, they call them in the Navy. They could be any denomination, but they give a prayer every night. It's called let us pray. And then everything kind of stops and you bow your head and then you say a prayer to yourself, pray a prayer to your teammates, a prayer for the ship, because you're basically in a combat situation. This particular night, prayer normally goes at 9:55, 10 o'clock. Whether we're air ops or not, right? We're doing an ORE, so we were in the middle of what they call battle stations. So it doesn't come to in battle stations because we're at battle. But battle stations ended at probably like 10:30, and then at 11:55, I think that's when he came on. And the reason I remember because the lights were still on, and we were still in battle dress. And he goes, "Let us pray." I was in my rack, and I remember bowing my head, and it's like, "Let us," whatever he was saying, and then Amen. Then the lights go out, right? It doesn't go to dark, but the lights then go to taps. They play taps, and then all the lights, they go from white lights to red lights, and then you're in your evening watches and stuff. But we're doing ORE, you can still hear the planes taking off and landing. It's landing and taking off. About 11:30, you hear an explosion, it rocks. It's a metal ship, so you can feel the ripples through the ship. Everybody kind of wakes up, or at least I can say that everybody woke up because you hear the ding, 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 battle station, fire on the deck, and all this stuff. And you automatically know where you're supposed to go because you've been training at it. And I remember leaving, as you're leaving, they're locking down the hatches so the ship doesn't sink. They go to Circle Zebra, and it's like they're circling these little things are Circle Zebra, Circle Williams. Oh, these are different things they do with the ship so the ship doesn't sink. I walk out the door and the hatch closes behind me. I'm like, just something you notice. Like, they just close the hatch. As you're running up to your battle station, as I'm running to the battle station, there's bodies on stretchers that are with people. Let me change that. There are people carrying people on stretchers that are going back to the casualty elevator. So there's 4 elevators. There's one up on the floor of the tower, and there's one behind it, and there's one on the left side, and there's one on the right side. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the third one, which is behind the superstructure, is what they call a casualty elevator with all the dead people. That's where they're going to go, right? So as I'm running back, they're running back to that elevator. And they're running back to the other elevator where they're doing the medical. They're running back to the casualty. So these are people that I'm running by, and they're just, decapitated because when the plane came by, it ripped off the heads of people. A couple people that were sitting on these, they're called tractors. And it was low enough that it just whacked or guillotined it because it wasn't because people sit on the foul line. The foul line is where the wing, you can't go beyond the foul line. It's foreign object damage. So people were sitting there standing because that's where you stand. Because when the plane lands, they chalk it, they put chalks on it, and then they put the tow truck on it and they pull it out of the way so the next plane can land. You got less than a minute and a half to do that. That's how the planes get to their parking station. So you have people there driving with tractors on board this carrier, pulling planes into their positions, and then there's planes that are landing. It's just super busy. It's crazy busy up there. It's nighttime. So there's a fire going off on the bow. There's people been carrying dead people back, and then it looks like an old Batman movie where everything's at an angle. And I start running, and I'm looking, and then I see a hose team go down. I hear explosion, I see a flash, and I see a hose team go down. And what that means is that explosion killed or injured all those people on their hose team, right? It's a fire hose. So now the hose is, full of pressure, just bouncing around until they can get it turned off so we can get more people on the hose. It isn't like we need to stop and get that hose under control. It's get the hose under control and put out the fire, right? It's doing damage because it's banging all over the thing. Turn the water off, get guys back on the hose. You got to get the fire out. The fire is the most important thing you do. Fire is bad on a ship, really bad on a submarine, really bad out in space. but fire bad on ship. That's because there's bombs and everything else on board there. So we go up there and we fight that thing all night long. And then you got to cool off all the missiles because of the heat. So you're just waiting for one of those things to cook off. Imagine standing there and you got a guy with his hand on it going, it's still hot. And you're like, this thing's going to wipe all of us out. It's going to blow a hole in the deck because one of those Phoenixes already blew a hole in the deck. So all the water we're spraying is just going, it's pouring inside the ship. The ship's taking on water while it's trying to get to a place where you help put out the fire. It's like just fucking madness. I was out
And
there all
there's like,
night.
yeah, and I can only imagine because there's a balance too. If you cool something too fast, there's cracks. And
Yeah.
if you crack a bomb,
Yeah.
it can explode. If you don't cool it down
Yeah.
fast enough, it can explode. No
Yeah.
stress or pressure there, right? Did you use your timeout card?
No, no, I didn't whip out my time out card. Yeah, no, I'm too stressed out. No,
Yeah, no,
no.
seriously, we're joking about that. But ladies and gentlemen, this is why men need to be men and people need to be
Yeah.
strong, men or women, because our military is not what it was 20 years ago, 40 years
No.
ago, certainly not 50 years ago. And
Yeah.
we are setting our soldiers up for failure and long-term trauma and endangering our country. So if you're
Yeah.
voting in America and you're supporting these liberal woke idiots who are pulling out timeout cards for boot camp,
Yeah.
there's no timeout in war. As Rob, continuing your story, I just did want to point that
No,
out.
I'll give you a better example of that. The USS Cole, when this terrorist blew the ship up, when they put a bomb, the teams were not functioning the way they're supposed to.
Mhm.
And they're called damage control teams. And not to say anything bad or good about them, but they blew a hole in that ship, damn near sank. It damn near sank because of, let's just say that I don't think things went the way they were supposed to.
Yeah, and then
Um,
the fact is, I mean, you can disagree with me, but I think they
no, I
should.
don't.
No, no, I'm saying this is the statement I'm gonna make. I personally
Yeah.
think boot camp should be brutal because if you can't make it through boot
Yeah.
camp, you don't want to go to war. You shouldn't, you know what I mean? So wussing people
Yeah.
out in boot camp is setting this all up for failure at war.
Yeah. Well, they lowered the ASVAB scores. The ASVAB scores, the Armed Forces Battery Test, basically tells you what it's the SAT for the military.
Yeah, I
So
know what
but it'll
ASVAB is,
tell
but
you. Yeah.
what did they do with the
Yeah.
scores? I didn't know that.
Well, that determines your job. Like there's like 10 indicators that said, okay, you can be a crypto tech or you can be a bosun mate, right? And every other job in between, those are two top ones, top and the bottom one. And so depending on how high you score, you're going to get the better job. How low you score, you're going to get the worst job. But there's a minimum because a non-designated comes in at a 25. Non-designated, they don't have a job. They can come in, they can figure out when they get in the Navy, right? They're basically, you're in the Navy, you barely made it, but you can figure out what you're going to do and have a successful career. So our government in the last couple of years said that there was dropping it down to 10. 10. The last time they did something like that was in World War II, I think. And then there was more of a problem trying to, you got people at that point, you got people that can't tie their shoes, don't know their left and right. Not insulting anybody, but that person doesn't know their left from their right, and that person does not know right over left, and that person is never going to follow the directions you want them because they can't understand it. There's a limitation to what a person with a 10 ASVAB has. I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm just saying that there's a limitation in the knowledge you can give them. And we see that with all the incidents that have happened recently in the Navy, where they just went back and said, "We're okay, it's going to be 25. It should be like 60. If you want to have the best fighting force in the world, the ASVAB should be 60. You're going to have smarter people, but the people will say, well, they're not going to stay as long. Well, you have to challenge people. You have to do your job if they have a 60 ASVAB because the average SEAL is 55. I think it's 50. Or maybe 60 now, but it's 50. But if
Yeah,
you're going to be a nuke, it's like 90.
yep. I don't want to go
Yeah.
into we got a lot more of your story. We're going to pick up with the boat and the chaos and the
Yeah.
fires. We're going to pick up there. But I love God and I love America. And I have the utmost respect for all the men and women who serve. And the way our government is just not just watering down, but purposely destroying from the inside out our armed forces. I know a Navy SEAL. You know, it's not easy to become a Navy SEAL, like, you know, Rob, and you can talk about.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do the things you're asked to do. But he recently left because he says all they want are 18-year-olds with no soul that will just kill anybody anytime for any reason. They're not looking for anybody to have a brain. They just almost want a robot to control. Is that what you're seeing too now under this administration?
You mean the military or the SEALs?
Well, military in general, but he was a Navy SEAL and he stepped down because he said it's just got so bad.
I could see that because what you're doing is so just for a minute, when the Navy used to, when I came in, the Navy would only take people that, well, so majority of people they would only take if they were already in the military, right? So you would join the Navy, and then you would apply for the program. It means you already had some experience, and a little bit older, and you did well. So if you're 22 years old and you can do 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups and do 10 pull-ups, then no one's ever failed doing that. But you know what else? No one's ever graduated doing less than 6 pull-ups. No one ever graduated that does less than 100 sit-ups. No one ever graduated less than push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups. Yeah, no one's ever graduated with those with lower numbers than that. So you're not going to get a guy that if he does 6 pull-ups, he's not going to graduate because all the failures have that in common. Now, will a guy fail that can do 50 pull-ups? Of course he can. Yeah, but no one graduated with 6 pull-ups, and that's what you're looking for. The Navy came back with, yeah, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to recruit more people into the SEAL teams. So we're going to offer them a contract. It's called uh, it's a SEAL. It's a SEAL contract. It's a diver contract. Basically, diver, EOD, SEAL, SWIC, SAR swimmer. These are different specific contracts. Kind of like what the Army does with paras with airborne. Everybody can be airborne if they sign a contract. And so what you're not getting is you're not getting the best qualified people. You're getting a person that meets the requirements of the contract. This is what he's talking about, the soul thing. So I can train to the numbers and they can't hold it against me because the minimum number to get to buds is 6 for pull-ups, 42 for sit-ups, and I think it's 50 push-ups. And then I think I'm going to say a 7:35 run. I don't know exactly what it is, but 11:30 in the swim. If you're not cranking 9 or below or 8 below in the swim, you shouldn't even fucking try out because the seals are in the water. But the way the contract works is that no, this is all they have to do. It's the minimum requirements. And then some jackass says, we'll train them from there. You're not the chasm is so large to get a person that can't swim and to be an effective warrior because you're talking about physical ability. You're not even getting into the mental acuity and the differences in that and the warrior mindset. You haven't gotten to that. You're just talking about can you do this minimum number of people. The Navy gets the people. They get I think they give 1,100 contracts out a year. 1,100 and it may be more than that. But of that 1,100, how many of those guys are going to make? You're not going to get 1,100 SEALs. You may get 150, maybe get 200, maybe get 220. Because when the SEAL class is up, and you should see it, it is a sight to see. 200-300 kids standing on the side of the road with little helmets. They don't have the helmets on yet. Standing there, and you go 16, 20 maybe out of that 200-300 people, because only the 16 of that number is actually qualified to be there. They should be there, you know. And people are like, well, they only recruit white people. No, they recruit people that are qualified, that meet the minimum qualifications. This isn't a DEI thing. What are the qualifications for going into the program? These are qualifications for going to the program. Do you meet those? No, I don't. Well, okay, it's not a DEI issue because it's so low. In my opinion, it's so low. The bar is so low to get in. Anybody could do it, but whether or not you're willing to do it is completely different. Whether you're not to put the hard work and drive into it. He's right that your friend is that they watered it down. So of those numbers, how many people think are going to graduate? You may get 16 or 20 of them through Hell Week. And then it's a matter of what the attrition is after Hell Week. It's less than that. So maybe you get 10 out of that 150, 200 people that make it through Hell Week. And then they have people that have been rolled back because of injuries. And that class goes back up to maybe 25 or 30 because they're putting in the people that injured from Hell Week or injured at other times in training that they keep them there for. And now you got a class that's a mixture of the original 10 plus like 10 or 15 other people that have been waiting for this class to start up. In my opinion, because I'm a Nobel Hell Week, and we'll get into that later, but that means nobody fucking quit. And with 28 in, 28 out. Problem with that is that people don't it's 6 months, right? Hell week, not hell week, but the first part of buds is 6 months. And if you take 10 months to get through it, or 12 months to get through it, or another year and a half to get through because you were injured, I get that, but it's still a 6 month program. And whether you're physically ready to do the program is completely something different. If I did the program every, let's say I do the program every, what I mean by that is that I go to buds, I get injured first phase. I class up with the next class. So I start with class, I'm going to use my numbers. So I start with class 145. I get injured. 146 goes by me, and then 147 starts. So that's two classes now. I started 145, now I'm in 147. And I go through first phase at 145. I get injured at the end of first phase, and I go to 147 when they come down. There's like 10 weeks between 145 and 147. But I'm going to roll in 147. Now I'm going to finish up the end of first phase, and then I'm going to go to second phase. Well, I got injured again. So now I leave 147, and this is a bad injury. Maybe it's a hamstring or whatever. Now I'm going to class up in 152. Well, fuck. That's 20, sorry for my language, but that's three classes. That's 15 weeks. So now I got 25 weeks, right? I've got off. And then I go to third phase. And maybe I make it to third phase. But I still got 25 weeks off that the other guys didn't get. And now they have it so it's first phase, second phase, third phase, and SQT, which is basically the advanced training. It's all one big loop. So it's not a year anymore. I mean, it's not 6 months anymore. It's a year. And you get the same thing happening. People get injured, they put them back in. You get injured, and I'm not disparaging the program. I'm saying that you're not getting the best qualified people on day one in order for them to always make it through. And every SEAL will tell you that the attrition rates are great. Everybody loves it. But I always say that if you're running a business and you were having that attrition, then, you know, the thing is that you would fucking go out of business. But the government uses it as a tool, just like they did Top Gun, to tell people they can become SEALs. So they can tell their parents. So people go, oh, my son's going to become a Navy SEAL. And then that kid doesn't fucking make it. And then what happens? Now you're dealing with all these emotional issues with these kids. People have committed suicide. People have gotten injured. People have gotten out of the Navy. They go to a new job, and in the Navy, they don't want to do that. And they're a pain in the ass because they don't want to do that. I don't think that as they say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze when you got these kids. Yeah, it's not. So you drop the ratings down, and then you got this kid. I'm gonna have to help him. They're gonna hire somebody else to help him. They got a course right now, and I'm not critical of naval special warfare, but when you have a pre-course to a pre-course, we got a problem.
Yeah,
When
that's like
we
being
can't
an
get people,
that's like
yeah,
being
go
in
ahead.
engineering and taking remedial math.
Right, exactly.
You don't
Right.
belong
We
there,
have a
or you need to
problem in this
you
country.
need to get yourself ready before you show up. It's not the colleges, it's not the
Right.
Navy's role to get you ready.
Yeah, and that's a problem. The Marine Corps used to have this slogan, "What are you doing?" I used to do recruiting for Spec War and for the Navy, and I remember going to the Arnold Fitness Classic, which is in an odd place. I think it's in Ohio. It's in a weird place, but he has this thing in the middle of the state where it's called the Arnold Fitness Classic. It's awesome. They have bodybuilders. They have everything there, like everything, not just a bodybuilder. They have everything. So I'm in there, and the Marines are there, and we got our booth. They got their booth, and this guy comes around and goes, "What is the Navy going to do for me?" And I was like, we have a lot of programs, but if you want to become a SEAL, it's completely different than just joining the Navy. So I'm here to talk to kids that want to become a SEAL. And then he was like, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, let's see how many pull-ups you can do first before I waste my time talking to you. Let's see if your kid can do 10 pull-ups. If your kid can do 10 pull-ups, I'll talk to him. But if not, he can just talk to an he can just join the Navy, right? I'm not giving him a contract. The Navy guys would do that." So I was kind of like, yeah, "Oh, go see that guy over there. He's going to tell you to do pull-ups." You can do 10 pull-ups, we can talk. You can't do 10 pull-ups because I know you're not going to make it otherwise. Father was like, I'm going to go down Marines. And I said, go ahead, right? I don't care because I'm not a recruiter. I'm more of a brand person for naval special warfare. I'm here to show what SEALs are like. And I remember the Marines, because they're right next to us, saying, what are you going to do for us?
Yeah.
What are you going to do for us? We let you become a Marine. What are you going to do for us? And they got a pull-up bar too. And he asked the guy, how many pull-ups can you do for the Marine Corps? I mean, it's just a complete different approach to getting the best qualified people. Is that what are you going to do for us? Which is different than what can we do for you? You appreciate things more when you earn them than they are when they're given to you. Actually, goes back to that lion, and it definitely goes back to the wolf thing. You earn more when you work for it than you do if it's just given to you.
Yeah.
And the Marines, in my opinion, for the most part, they're all fucking warriors. They're all lions, right? The ones I've ever met, the ones I've ever worked with, they're all pretty consistent with being, the brotherhood of making sure they're the best. Now, I'm sure there's people in their air wings that are not like that, but definitely the regular ground pounding guys, they're good to go.
Yeah. So I didn't
And
mean
then,
this was an important topic, but it's probably not. Maybe we need to do it in your show. So thanks for
yeah,
exploring that. So let's go
yeah,
back. You're on this ship.
yeah.
There's 4 elevators. People are going to the
Oh
wrong
shit.
elevator, and everything's going on around you. Where does your life
Yeah.
go from there, Rob?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, the thing about awards, the ship pulled in to Norfolk and then they dropped harbor. So back in the day, so they know that people were going to leave, right? So you couldn't leave the ship till the investigation was done. They wanted to talk to everybody, but they also had to get back out because we had to. I think we were getting ready to go to war, or not war, but it's a conflict we're going to. And that's why we're doing the OREs. And we had to get underway for the deployment. So they wouldn't let you leave the ship. But so we pulled back in, dumped all the trash off, and then we basically got the engineers on board to fix it, and then we went back out to sea. I don't know how many people were UA, but people would take now in the old days they used to have these phone banks on the pier where you would go out and make a phone call on with your AT&T calling card back to your family or friends to tell them you're okay. The bank of these things. There's like 50 of 100 of them that are on the piers of when the ships pull in so sailors can get off. This is back in the day where you had to use an AT&T calling card or an MCI card. For the old school guys, they remember the MCI card, calling cards. So anyway, that no cell phones, no text messages, no none of that stuff, no internet, intranets. Anyway, so we pulled in, and everybody wants to talk to. Well, I'll say this is that when the ship pulls in, they usually connect the landlines to the ship, and you can use the phones inside the ship. But they didn't do that. They just hooked us up to power, and these are nuclear carriers. But they would hook us up to power, and then they got the crews on board. We were there for probably 18 hours max. But if you wanted to get off the ship, you got to take trash off. They were like, "Who are you? What division are you at? What are you doing?" Well, you have to take trash off the ship. So if you wanted to get off the ship, make a quick phone call, you would take trash off the ship. So people were creating trash to take it off the ship. Some people put their personal clothes inside the ship and went UA, unauthorized absent. I'm not going back on board the ship because the tragedy of what happened is in seeing the loss of life. It's too hard for some people. But let me say this to be clear. None of them fucking people were up there with me fighting that fire. I don't I don't know how to say it any other way. Is that the people that left the ship were not the people that I saw when I went back out to sea. There were other people that weren't on the flight deck. Remember I said they circled, I think it's Circle Zebra. They circled Zebra, the ship, or Circle William. I can't remember which one it is. But they closed all the doors. So there are only like 150 of us up there fighting the fire, right? Because you have all the pumping stations, you got all the damage control below decks, you have all the medical personnel. This ship is humming with problems. It wasn't just the fires on the deck. There was that 150 people was like 4 or 5 hose teams. And then you have
And so people who aren't familiar, so they have
the
perspective.
bomb ordnance people, and you got the missiles that. Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a
Yeah.
delay. There's an internet connection. I apologize. But for people who
Oh,
don't
for people that
understand,
don't understand.
how many
Yeah.
people are on the ship total? Because
Yeah.
they have no perspective how big these ships are.
Oh, there's 5,000 people on board the ship.
Yeah.
A
So
full
you're,
complement is 5,000. The ones now are like 6,500.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you're talking about
There's
a hundred.
150 of us up there fighting the fire.
Yeah. So that's only a small majority.
Yeah.
It's not even 10%. It's not
Small
5%.
portion of people.
You're like
Yeah.
at 1 or 2% at most are
No.
fighting this fire.
Yeah.
So I just want to
Yeah.
make sure people
Yeah.
understand
And these are
what
people I
you're
would
saying.
see it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they're like, well, Rob, how do you know? Because these are the same people I would see every day. Because remember, your firefighting station or your combat station is going to be the people you see every time you go up there. So if I'm going to be up on the one row on the care or the four row, those are people I would see all the time. You're familiar. You don't like, hey, I'm just going to go to this gun port. You don't do that. You go to where you're supposed to be. So when that fire went off or when it started, you ran to where you saw all the people that you know that you normally work with because a good cohesive team works good together, and we were a good host team. So when we pulled in, we must have lost, I'd say 700 people, but they weren't the people that I was fighting side by side with. There were other people and admin people, cooks, right? People that work inside the ship, the barbers, because they have barbers on board the ship. They have CSs, which are culinary specialists, admin people. And I think that's in any war. PTSD is not the warriors majority of the time. The PTSD is from the people who are the anxiety and the trauma that they feel when they're in combat situations. And this is not a blanket statement for anybody that's suffering from PTSD that's a warrior. This is just to say that a majority of the time that's going to happen to people who are not in a group that's tight that moves the way we move, or a group that does what we do. Like you'll have PTSD symptoms, but the people that really have a problem with it is a person that's never been in a combat situation before. It's not the door gunner. It's a person that they picked up that's been rescued that's going to have all the issues or problems because we're trained to understand what we're going through. And so you have your warriors out there fighting. And what you were saying earlier is that you don't have as many of them anymore. So we're going to have a lot more mental health issues or a lot more PTSD than we used to have. I mean, and that name's changed from shell shock to, it's funny that, and not to just dwell on this, but if you look at shell shock back in World War One and World War Two, where the guy is shaking and they were hysterica and Patton got in trouble for actually slapping a person that said that he didn't need to be in his military because people were dying while he's sitting in Iraq, and people were like, "Oh my God, he slapped a soldier that was under a shell shock." But Patton's a warrior, right?
Yeah.
He was a straight up fucking hard ass. Like we're gonna go kick ass and take names, and I don't need people in the military that can't do that. And that's when we started seeing this reduction in building or making of a warrior. And now we have it now where the majority of people get out of the Navy now want to go get 100% disability or military because they want to become PTSD because they want to have peace. It's not true. I'm saying that there's a lot more people claiming PTSD now because of the way they were raised than there were before. Because we're not raising lions. We're raising sheep, and sheep are afraid of lightning. Sheep are afraid of the bad weather. They huddle, right? They don't do what lions do, and they definitely don't do what wolves do. So we're getting back to the carrier. A lot of people left, and we went out to sea, and we completed doing what we're doing. And I don't know what happened to those people. I don't know if they went to court martial or whatever, but we went out to sea, and I spent 4 years on the USS Nimitz. I wouldn't say kicking ass and taking names, but doing whatever the government wanted us to do. This puts me in Spain, and then I was in Spain for 2 years. I was going to get out of the Navy and go play football, and I played a lot of sports. I met a lot of people. That's where I realized that I wasn't a good DEI person. The Navy started incorporating women into the military, and I was not. I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to that at all. I had my own issues with it, and I said before I've treated a lot of women badly because of my own traumas, and I think one of the ensigns, she's probably not taking orders from women. I just don't know. I don't even know why you're here. I remember telling her that. And they're like, "Oh, that's a dick move." It's like, yeah, but she doesn't know me. She doesn't know what I've been through. And this is I was in Spain. But oddly enough, that's where I met a guy that says you should go to the SEAL teams if you're going to have that attitude. Or, I was working out, I was doing all those other things. And she said, "Did I know SEALs? And then you're not a SEAL." And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna be." She goes, "No, I'm not going to approve your chit." A chit's basically a piece of paper that a sailor puts in requesting to do something different. You can put a chit in to play football. You put a chit in to get married. You put in a chit if you want to move off base and move off housing. This is these chits are for. They're like request chits. That's what they actually called. She was my division officer. I submitted to my chief, which is the senior listed person from the division I worked in. She was a division officer for the division I worked in, and then it goes up to the XO of the CO, and it was denied, and it went to the XO, the executive officer of the squadron I was belonging to when I was in Spain, and he called me into his office and said, and oddly enough, this is weird. I'm just thinking about this stuff out now out loud. You remember the movie The Final Countdown? You ever
Maybe.
hear of it?
Yeah, I've heard of it, and I mean that was from the
Yeah.
80s, right?
Right, it was. Well, I'm old, so
No, I mean we're
yeah.
not that far off, but
So this
I
guy was one of, yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. He's one of the officers. He's one of the officers in the movie Final Countdown. The changing of my career of not doing something different was from the fire, which is why I went to Spain. I was like, I want to get off the ship. I want to do something different. He played in the movie and I'm making connections that aren't there, but he was one of the executive officers on the carrier plane in the movie. Frog, I think that was his nickname. I think it's one of the pilots on the plane, and they're going to attack the Japanese in the movie. And he says, "What makes you think you're going to be a Navy SEAL?" And I go, "I don't know anything about the Navy SEALs." He says, "Why do you want to go?" I said, "It's something I think I can do." He goes, "You don't know anything about them?" I go, "No." Because I said somebody who was a Navy SEAL said I could be a Navy SEAL, so I assumed that was all I need to know. He goes, I'm gonna ask you one question. You just gotta give me a good answer. Will you quit?" And I was like, "Sir, I've never quit anything before in my life." He said, "Okay, okay." I will say this guy's name, Clark Cummings, because he was kind of my mentor. People found out I wanted to become a Navy SEAL, and they were like, "Hey, there's a guy named Clark Cummings," and I can say his name because he knows this is a true story, and I don't think he would be upset with me saying it. But he was in the hospital bed getting a sur He just finished a surgery, and I come stumbling there, 23, 24 years old. "Hey, how's it going?" I wasn't like that. I was actually very shy and reserved. They're like, "There's a Navy SEAL back there. You need to be careful when you talk to him." I was like, "What?" "You gotta be careful when you talk to him. He's a Navy SEAL." My name is Rob, and some of my friends at work here said I should talk to you about becoming a Navy SEAL. And Clark Cumming filled my head with so much bullshit. I look back at it now, you know. But he gave me the time of day. I had never had that before, where he just sat down and talked to me about what the community was about, not about the physical attributes or, the war stuff they did. It was just like about the community and how, having a bunch of brothers that you ran around with. And I didn't have that, you know. The last thing he said to me was, "Go across the street to this room. A bunch of guys in there that I work with, other SEALs. Another guy named Don Dorsey. Can't remember these other guys' name, but those are the ones that stand out." I go over there and they're at the end of the hallway on the right hand side, and they're the last room on the right hand side, and I walk down there thinking that they're gonna be just really receptive of some guy, a black guy actually, walking into the little space. So, and I didn't think it was about being black. I just thought I was being shy, and actually that black didn't have anything to do with it. But I was like just really, really shy talking to people I didn't know, and that people had such high esteem for. And there was no internet, so you couldn't look them up, kids. So I walked back there and I was like, "Fuck, those guys are big." And I just go walk by the door. I walk down. So I walk back and I go, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "Hey, Clark, somebody Cummings." They're like, "What are you looking for him?" I go, "No, no, I talked to him and he said, come over here." I go, "Why you want to come over here?" He said, he told me that about the SEAL program. I said, what do you want to know about the SEAL program? I'm like, I don't know anything about the SEAL program. I was like, I don't know anything about the SEAL program. He just told me I should talk to you guys. So I went over there and they were very open, talking about the SEAL program, talking about what to expect, what I should do, how to prepare for it, and that there's a failure rate. And I didn't understand failure rate. I was like, why would people quit if they signed up for it? They're like, he started laughing at me like, yeah, people quit all the time. I'm like, why would they do that? Because people quit for a variety of reasons. I just couldn't fathom people sign up for something because I had my work ethic. Why would you sign up for something that's the best thing in the world and just walk away from it? So I left that meeting with a renewed vigor of I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. So fast forward 6 weeks later, I got an orders that said, "Hey, test this guy from the divers." Called me up, said, "Hey, you got to come and take your SEAL test." I took my SEAL test, and then I was like, "I need to start training for the SEAL program." So I was like doing SEAL, what I thought SEAL stuff was. Back then I was like, "What do SEALs do?" And there was like no information. But I said, "I want to test myself." So I went to the pool and I was talking to this guy, and I said, "Well, how far is a long swim?" And he goes, "Oh, a mile's a long swim." I go, "How many laps is that?" He goes, "It's this amount of laps." So, okay, I'm gonna do both of those. I'm gonna do it twice. I think it was like 16 or 20 laps or something like that. I can't remember what it was. Oh, that's what it was. I said, "Can I swim until you close?" That's what it said. That's what I said. It was like 3 hours. He's like, "Yeah, you can do whatever you want to do." So I got in the pool and I swam for 3 hours straight, right? Just like, I'm not gonna quit. I'm not gonna quit. Because I knew the time was clicking the entire time and I wanted to do my laps on time. So I was pounding, just pounding as good as I could swim. I have no idea how far I swam. And I got to the very end, it was like 3:30 or 4 o'clock. The guy goes, "Hey, we're closing in 5 minutes." I said, "Okay, okay, okay." And then he came back into my last lap. He goes, "Do you want to swim some more?" And then here's the thing. I'd already met my goal. And I remember this when I said I was ready, because I said to this guy, if I could swim for another half hour, then I know I'm ready. And he goes, "I'll give you another half hour." I swam for another half hour. It was like almost 4 hours in the water. And I got out and I didn't know anything about hydration. Back then it was like, you know, piss in the pool, whatever. I got out and I felt like my body weighed so much because I was in water the entire time for 4 hours. And I was so dehydrated. I felt like fucking, I felt like such shit. And I was like, I could swim another 20 minutes. That's what I was thinking when I got out. I was like, I could swim another 20 minutes. Yeah, I'm fucking ready. And then after that, I got my orders like 3 or 4 weeks later, and I got to Buds, and man, that swim made me ready because I didn't know anything about hydration. I didn't know anything about protein, or I dropped like fucking 30 pounds the first couple of weeks I was there. I was running. I didn't run a lot. See, that's the thing. I didn't run. Clark Cummings told me not to run a lot because he goes, "You're going to get shin splints before you get there." I said, "Don't run a lot." So I was like, okay. So I got to Buds and I hadn't ran a lot. And our first run was like 4 miles. And I hadn't ran that far in like a while in soft sand. I got there and my God, man, I thought, this sucks. But if those guys can make it, I was talking about the instructors, I'm gonna make it. I said, whatever they do, I can do. I may not do it as well as they, but I can do what they're doing. Right? Only thing I said, only thing I got over me is time. And Bobby Richardson told me the only thing stopping you from getting, the only thing that's, how do you put it? The only thing that's going to get you dropped in this program is your fucking run. That's what he said to me. I was like, "Who ya, Instructor Richardson?" But I knew at that time I wasn't going to quit. Like, you can't make me quit. Like I told some instructor, "Why are you even here?" I said, "I'm not here for you. I'm here for me. This isn't about you and me. This is about me. So whatever you tell me, it's great. But I know that there's an expiration date on you till I go to the next phase. So you can say what you want to me, because every day you talk to me is one day less I have to talk to you and listen to you." And I tell you, the brutal instructors on me with the other black instructors. They're like, "We don't want some knucklehead. So you're gonna earn this shit." And yeah, they were like, "You're gonna earn it." Keith Willard, yeah, he's the stuntman up in LA. He was like, "You're gonna earn this shit because you're not gonna bring us down." And I was like, "Who's we?" because I don't see any other black SEALs around me. Who's we? He would be like, he was one of the funniest instructors. But every time he saw me, he would drop me down. I'll tell you a quick story. And I don't want people to stop me on the street because I'll punch you in the face. But Keith Villar used to tell me he wanted me to build self-respect for myself. So he would say, in his own way, he would say, "Hey, boy," right? Which is considered a derogatory term by black men. He would go, "Hey, boy," and he would say, when you hear that, I want you to say, "You must mean Roy," because my last name is Roy. So for years, "Hey, boy, you must mean Roy," and and even when I was in LA doing movies, he had some stunt guy come up to me out of the blue, and I was fucking punched the guy. He goes, "Hey, boy," and I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Oh, I talked to Keith Fuller," and I go, "Oh, he wants me to say you must mean Roy." It's a good thing. But I appreciate him, Dave Noble, Cherry. There's a bunch of guys that I knew that they didn't hold me to a higher standard. They made me hold myself to a higher standard. They made me realize that you're not there for anybody else but yourself. And no one's going to give you a hands up. Because if you look at it, if someone said, "Yeah, the Black SEALs all stick together, so I'm going to help a brother out," it's like, but I'm not appreciated by the community by somebody helping me out. I'm appreciated by the community to go through the same trials and tribulation they go through. What those guys did was made sure I got that and some. Like, if you're not going to quit, it doesn't matter what we do to you. That's the mindset. If you're not going to quit, it doesn't matter what we do to you, no matter what we say to you. And people quit all the time because of what's said to them. What do they think is derogatory? They said something about my mother. Are you here for your mother? Do you think it's real? If this guy who's your friend is going to be your teammate in the future is saying X, Y, Z to you, what do you think the enemy's going to say to you? Are you going to get upset? Are you going to are you going to be like, "Well, I can't be"? They saying no. You need to like put that shit aside and do your job. Yeah, but they said there's a whole lot worse thing to be said to you, which is why if you have a really cushy life, you're not going to make it through the program. You can, I want to be a Navy SEAL. Want is not your passion to be a Navy SEAL, but you got to have the character, you got to have the drive, you got to have the ambition to want to be the best that you can be. The SEALs are, I'd say, the one group of people that the sum of you is, I should say, the way to sum you up is, people, yeah, they do extraordinary things when no one's looking. They do extraordinary things because they believe in service, and they do extraordinary things because they have the shield of God protecting them. But more importantly, they do what they do because they can, right? You don't have a lot of people that can do the SEAL teams. And quite frankly, when I talk to people and they're like, "Well, the SEALs are like this." And I say, "Yeah, you don't know the SEALs because you're not one, but we never compare ourselves to anybody else. Everybody compares himself to SEALs. And every movie likes to throw in there SEAL Team Six this, SEAL Team Six that. It's like they want to throw it in there because they want that brand to be part of who they are. And then they destroy it because then they put in people who would never make it through the SEAL program. Like the G.I. Jane movie. It's just like that would never happen. That would never. It just wouldn't happen, right? There's too much respect for people who go through the program for them to be like, "Well, let's rape this chick like she's the most important thing that's there." She's not, right? The program itself will weed out people who shouldn't be there. And you can't carry your buddy can't carry you. It's individual effort within a group environment. And you got to be successful because your team needs to be successful. No. But Bud was difficult. Bud was hard. Everything that happened to me up until that point was based on my resilience from everything that happened to me before that. All the SEAL teams did for me, I should say all they did for me, but all that things that happened to me before that helped me make it through the program. Now, I will say that I would have made it through without any of the trauma. Could have done without any of the trauma. I'm gonna use a God thing for this. Is that maybe that wasn't my path. The decisions I made were because of the decisions I made at the time. Would I have made other decisions? I don't know. But whatever I went through right now to get to where I am now, I would go through it again because it's important to be who I am now. You start questioning your past, and what you should have, could have, would have done, then your kids aren't your kids, your grandkids aren't your kids. You wouldn't have got your degree. You wouldn't have built your own business. You wouldn't have, you wouldn't have affected so many people's lives. I think a lot of people, and I'll say this, be truthful, is how many people, what's your legacy? How many people's lives have you affected? How many people have you on this earth have you helped become be the person they should be or want to be? Whereas opposed to, I help that guy out. I don't do that. I fucking go all in on helping somebody be who they want to be. And I think that's important. I think as other wolves and other lions, you're showing them how to hunt, not because they're hungry. I mean, because they're hungry, not because they just want to eat. If you get a guy that just wants to eat, that's just like a person who wants to become a SEAL just so he can use it in his resume. That's a person who wants to eat. You want a person that wants to go to war and be the best he can possibly be and will do anything for that. That's a person that's hungry. That's a person that you want on your team because they're always going to be there for you in the end, as opposed to somebody who just wants to cavalierly go through this stuff. And
And
that's
now,
what I try to do when I work with people. Yeah.
yeah. So now you have all this life and
Yeah.
you're seeing it now translate into success.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're seeing it, not success in the sense of it's success, but what I'm saying
Yeah.
is it's not like for other people to judge, it's inside. You know, you are,
Well, yeah. It's intrinsic. It's intrinsic, not extrinsic.
yes, it's
Yeah.
fulfilling. And it's like,
Right.
there's so many words, but like the emotion I can feel, but it's, you're proving your worth. It's like watching Rocky. He went 15 rounds with Apollo Creed. I
Yeah.
have worth, right?
Yeah.
And now you're at that point in life. Bring us from there to today, Rob.
So I did 20 years, 25 years. And I started a company, leadership training company, my first one, because I wanted to give back. I ran recruiting. I had a company that trained people to go to the SEAL program because I wanted to give back. I wanted to find my replacements. And so I spent a lot of time with kids. And then most recently, when I say kids, I mean like 18, 19-year-olds, instead to figure out what they want to do with their lives and train them for the SEAL program. Where I'm at now. So I worked with VBSS, Visit Board Search and Seizure, where I teach a lower level of the SEAL skills. I did time at SEAL Team 6, and we're going to talk about that. That could be done another day. But my 10 years at SEAL Team 6 was great. But and again, I know we don't have a lot of time for that, but I'll just go to this other stuff.
Yeah, and just you before you go on, Rob, I don't
Yeah.
want you to rush your life. I don't want you to stretch it out.
No,
You
no,
got a
no. It's
long
just
life,
this.
but
That's
we
like
can
a
always pick up in another part. So let's hit the
yeah.
core of, especially
Right.
let's, if, again, capturing the mentality to get things done
Right.
despite what people say to you,
Right.
overcoming, the molestation and getting
Mhm.
rid of those demons, the
Yeah.
things that you really struggle with from, there to here today.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
So the SEAL Team 6 thing won't even because I was a product of my environment then. I was institutionalized, making things happen over there for 10 years. Great time. Love to talk about it. But the things that have made me who I am now are what I did after that. My ability to understand who I was. You go through, when you leave the SEAL teams, you go through a bit of a withdrawal because everybody around you is trying to be the best they can be. When you get out in the real world, yeah, that's not true. You can't say the stuff you want to say. No one gets your joke. No one gets your humor. So I was lost for a number of years. I'd say I didn't do drugs and I wasn't an alcoholic or anything like that. I didn't have a vice or what they call, I didn't have a coping mechanism. Was me understanding what I could do as opposed to let me lean on these drugs or let me lean on this alcohol. Let me get drunk in the middle of the street. Let me get a DWI. Let me do that. Wasn't that. It was like, what am I going to do next? How am I going to get from where I am now to where I want to be? What's the plan for me? God said there's a plan for me. What the hell is this plan supposed to be? Well, the plan is to make a decision. You can't sit there and read the tea leaves. So I'm looking at my life going, well, what I do is help people. So what do I want to do now? I want to help people. How do I do that? Just fucking build something, right? I I can't tell you. I used to do yoga in the park and had people show up. And that's how I built my business. And some guy goes, hey, You ever do this program? I go, yeah. And that's how I got Sony PlayStation. That's why I was in a room and I was talking to somebody and they're like, hey, what do you think about this video game? I go, video games are stupid. No, we'll never hire a person to become a SEAL that played a video game. This is back when PlayStation first started. They got strong thumbs. That's it. And then I got involved in the project and realized that we could recruit people from the video games. And I became the poster boy for Sony PlayStation for 10 years. SOCOM 1, SOCOM 2, SOCOM 3, SOCOM 4, all the commercials for like 10 years. It's fantastic. Then I did the Navy commercials to recruit people into the SEAL program as well. When I got out of the Navy, I had been working up in LA. I did a bunch of movies. One of them I started my own. That's the stuff that I was able to do because I was who I was. I was a force to be reckoned with. These things just fell into my life. When I say fell into my life, it's like I met this person, met that person, and they say, hey, we want to do this with you. Great. But all that stuff at the very end allowed me to start this company I have now, which is Trident Coaching Consulting. And what we do, what we have done in the past was let me back up for a second. Starting in the park, doing yoga and not wondering what's going to happen next, but doing the best job I could be was where I started this part of my life. This part of my life has been super rewarding because when I work with the VBSS teams, visit board search and seizure for the Navy, because I would work with young people like 18, 19 years old, see where they're at, just get them motivated to teach them leadership skills, teach them how to communicate with one another, teach them to know who they are. These are added value to me being an instructor. And then seeing where they, going overseas and doing missions. And then I would say, if you don't know what you're doing, listen to my voice inside your head, you know, telling you to do something. I know where I am, know where you're going, and what are you going to do next? Take the fight to the enemy. Those little slogans that people use, those, um, what are they called? I can't think of the word for it now. But those little things. A friend of mine, Doug Phillips, I can mention his name, a great friend of mine, was like, you need to do something that's going to help you in your out years, right? That you're a very good reader of people. You always want to help people. I think that you should become a psychologist. I was like, what? I got a high school education. And I said, I know, man, I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. I don't want to, I had a hard enough time in school because I went back, all my trauma from being told that wasn't my work. That's all I could think about. He says, no, man, just go. You're older now. You're more wiser. You understand what's going on. You're going to do really well. So I got my bachelor's in psychology. And then I was like, what am I going to do with this? And this is going to sound really bad, but I was looking around at all the people that have bachelor's in psychology and said, well, I'm not going to stop on this floor because I can do more. So I went for I'm in my master's program right now for psychology. I got like 3 months left before I get my certificate to be an MFT, which is it's a marriage family therapy, but also the LCCP, which is licensed clinical psychologist. And now I'm thinking about, I don't like this floor either. I may go for my PhD after this. And what that is that's my continually drive to, one, help people, and two, that knowing my value is what I think my value is, not what other people think my value is. I don't think a person with a high school education, I graduated in 1980, and I went back to school in 2017, before COVID. I graduated in 1980. That's a lifetime for people. And there's nothing. And if you look at, and I'll say it this way, it's because my friends will say it this way, it's like God's glory, right? So, and I'm Christian and I'm religious, but I'm not like, oh, I'm Christian and religious. But I understand it, that I don't know, would I be able to be healthy? Would I be able to do the things I do now had that not been laid out for me? I'm just now recognizing there was a path for me to get to where I am now. When I look back at all the things that happened to me and where I ended up, there's like this path. It's so clear now that I didn't see before. I mean, I'm going to be a psychologist probably in like, I'll be able to train, not train, but I'll be able to I see patients now actually, but I'll have my license in, a couple of years, which is amazing. If I go for my PhD, it'll be a couple more years, but all that stuff that happened to me and everything that's happened to me since boils back down to what happened to me when I was a kid. Like all these years, I never would have thought about I would have been where I am now. And then my kids are all going to school. They're all very good at what they do. They all know who they are. They have a substance in their personality. And then I look back and people go, "You're a good dad." And I'm like, "No, I'm not a good dad. My kids are just good kids." Because I took away the traumas that they would feel in their lives. The sexual assaults or not knowing who their father was and not showing up at the game. I went to all the games. You got to commit to going to the games. Got to be there. You got to be there for your kids. So when they want to talk to you, you can't have how am I to put it to my kids? Let me decide how I'm gonna react or feel with what's happening to you, as opposed to you thinking this was compensating, right? I didn't ever want my kids to compensate. I just tell me and then let me decide. And I have the reaction that I would do if I was like some terrible dad, and then I have the reaction of let me have the patience to understand what they're trying to tell me and be grateful that they're telling me and how I can help them because they're listening. So my kids are all doing good. And I look back and think, that's why I'm raising my grandson. That's why I'm raising my nephew. My grandson's a temporary thing, so my daughter's on deployment. But my nephew, you know, I'm trying to teach him these lessons as well. And they're just as important as they were back then. I'm trying to figure out some things with him and what's going on with him. 16-year-old boys they're something else. And I see myself in him, you know, traumas and other things that happen, not being wanted. All I can do is say to him is that there's so much to life that you haven't seen yet, but it's going to be tough. And that's for all of us. The journey is not easy. I don't know anybody's had an easy journey.
Not anybody who's done anything worthwhile.
No. If you're going to be a wolf, or you're going to be a lion, life's going to be hard for you. But the rewards they're so good. But, and it may not, I'll say this is that people want to equate things to financial. Yeah, there's money, but who you are as a person and not laying your head on the pillow at nighttime and not having to worry about things is what's very important. It can't be everything's backed up by, oh, these dollars I'm going to get. It's not about that stuff comes, right? You do a great job, you're going to get paid. If you don't do a great job, you shouldn't get paid. And people shouldn't help you. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't help you as in people should cast you out. I'm saying that we give too much now and that people don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
We just don't. The more you give people, the less they appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about people that are homeless, right? I'm talking if you give somebody who's never done anything with their lives, you keep giving them, that's all they're going to do is take.
Yeah. Look at our government, and you can speak
Yeah,
openly for or against it. But listen, man, we are like socialist, Marxist, communist, different
we're
shades of
close.
gray. Yeah, we're freaking in a bad
Yeah,
place.
yeah,
This is a republic, and we are
yeah,
not living based on the Constitution, enforcing laws. We don't need more law. We need to
yeah,
enforce it. But what you're saying is they're giving everything away, and
yeah.
it's nobody appreciates Jack, and it's driving us in a
Oh,
hole.
and I see it in my taxes I pay. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? What the?
What's
How'd
your
they go
number?
up so? Yeah,
Any
how'd they go
business
up so
owner
high?
out there? Any business
Yeah,
owner out there? What's your number one expense?
it's the
Taxes.
taxes. Taxes. They tax the hell out of you. And I see people that just, I've never had a job because part of what you do as a therapist is you have to go work at shelters and volunteer. I can't say anything bad about it because I'm working at one now, but man, that's just like some people just don't, they're never going to get it.
We'll talk off camera. I just met a man who is homeless
Mhm,
about a month ago, sitting down at a
mhm.
Panera Bread, talking to him. And I'm like, okay, so what do you want to do? I'm trying to work him through it. Like, okay, what's something goal? Like, what do you want to be? Okay, now reverse engineer it. How are you going to get out of this situation? What do you need to do? And he had a shit story, man. He had a tough life. And our own
Yeah.
government, while they're funding terrorists, while they're
Mm.
embezzling money, and while they're opening the borders and giving
Mm.
$5,000 gift cards and cell phones to terrorists,
Yeah.
they're letting this American veteran suffer without anything, right? So
Oh,
we got
yeah.
problems. But
Oh,
I
we
was
got
trying,
problems.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to
Yeah.
communicate to him, okay, but what are you going to do? It's all terrible. I agree.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do to turn this around? Because I can't help him in the sense of, if you helped him and gave him a house, if I gave him a job and we gave him a salary, that doesn't
Mhm.
change his mind, his heart. It doesn't change anything.
Oh, no, no, no. Don't
So,
change the mind. You can't change that mind. They got to know their value. And that's the hard part is like, how do you get a person to under, which is what I do when I'm talking to my patients, like, let me help you understand your value,
and
right? Let me
that's
understand your value.
See, and that's where I believe the love of God comes in. That's
Yeah.
where I believe steadfastly that God is love. And when we
Mhm.
see our value to God, the creator of us
Yeah.
all, everything
Yeah.
else fulfills. It does, at least
Yeah.
it did in my life.
Yeah. What does in my life too? I
Yeah.
couldn't be here without it.
Yeah.
Right. I
So,
mean, it's obvious that my kids could have been like other people's kids that are having problems or drugs or don't go to school or didn't need an education or did the kid live on their own or just so many things that can go wrong. So many things. But I've been blessed. I'm happy I've been blessed.
yeah, man. So listen, I know we have chunked out parts of your life, and we can
Hmm.
go back later, replay it, and then fill in the gaps in a bonus
Yeah.
episode. It's been an honor having you here today, Rob.
Thank you.
But before we wrap things up and go to where you are today and where you're headed next, how can we help you get there? We kind of talked about it a little bit,
Mhm.
but is there anything we missed between your birth and today, or a final thought you want to leave with the listeners?
Um, no, I think we covered a lot. I will say that the biggest problem that one can have in their life is losing their focus on what they want to achieve. And you may not know what you want to achieve if you don't have a good foundation of who you are, right? Passion's one thing, but knowing who you are and what you want to be able to try to accomplish is what you need to do. And that sounds like fuzzy math, but it really is knowing your value of who you are. And then because you have your value and how you serve others is going to help you serve yourself.
Amen. I think that's great words to close on and great thoughts to apply. Ladies and gentlemen, like our slogan says, don't just listen to great information and content, but do it. Like Rob says, repeat the good habits each day so you can have a great life in this world. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. You can have a great, fulfilled life in this world, but more importantly, an eternity to come with God, our Savior. So, Rob, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, continue the conversation, they might want to actually, talk to you personally. How can they overcome the demons in their head from years of abuse? What's the best way for them to reach you?
The best way to reach me would be, I'll give you my email address for my company, and it's robert.roy@trident-cc.com. That's robert.roy@trident-cc.com. Or you can go to our website, which is www. I'm going to say it that way, trident-cc.com. And then you can follow me on Instagram. It's under Trident as well. And Facebook, they're all the same. It's all Trident, either _CC or -CC. And I put out a reel every day about how to change things in your lives.
Beautiful. And we'll put links to these in the show notes. So, ladies and gentlemen, reach out to Rob. And if you have any questions, you got his information now. That's fantastic. And if we can help you in any way, let us know. Share this episode with your friends and family. Let's help as many people as we can. And Rob, it's been a true honor. Thank you, my friend, for being here today. And I look forward to doing a follow-up
Yeah, thank
episode.
you. Okay, cool, man. Thanks.
Excellent. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we love you. Go have a great
Okay.
day. Enjoy life, and we'll see you in the next episode. Ciao. All right, brother. How was that?
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life. The Remarkable People Podcast.